how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Welcome back, everybody. It is Wednesday, August 2nd. You know what that means. It is Cage My IQ's UFC Nashville Picks and Prediction Show with yours truly, Cage. As always, I'm joined with my co-host, Miles. How are you doing today, Miles?
Not bad, not bad. I got a co-pilot over here, Charles Oliveira. Just got back from watching Oppenheimer. Very long movie, but it's pretty good. They definitely did the research. A lot of the facts were dead on, but you could feel all 3 hours of that shit, though.
And we're just coming off that exciting pay-per-view weekend, UFC 291. If people missed out on it, Justin Gaethje knocked out Dustin Poirier for the BMF title with that leg kick to the face, just like Edwards did to Usman, coincidentally in the same building, almost a year to the date, which is crazy. You had the co-main event was pretty fun. You had Alex Fajeda versus Jan Blachowicz. A little bit of controversy with the decision, but it's always with the judges. I thought it was a close fight, so had they gone with Blachowicz, I would have been fine with it. I thought it was Fajeda. Like you said, you thought when you watched it was Blachowicz, but that's where the judging comes into play there. That's why I think you need to stick him above the arena.
Razor thin.
Yeah.
What's interesting, they actually have two potential contenders for the belt now in mind that Fajeda is part of that title bout. They are going to do Magomed Ankalaev and Johnny Walker to decide the second part of that title bout. So that's pretty much probably going to be. Yeah, I think it's probably going to end up being Fajeda versus Ankalaev, which that's going to be a cool fight. I could dig that.
I did that, and then of course you had Kevin Holland get the round one submission on Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa looked kind of rough. He looked rusty, but Kevin Holland.
Yeah,
he's found his home at the welterweight division. That long length, that reach, plays a good factor into the game that he has, and then he's showcased better takedown defense. So
I think he's all around just gotten better at welterweight. I think he's the bigger guy. He gets a little more strength, but like Chase's kind of been on that downward slide for a while now. Like I wasn't expecting too much from him, especially when you got a guy like Luque who, like, if you're persistent enough, you can get him down. You just got to be careful you don't get caught in nothing. But Chiesa couldn't even do that. Like he just, I don't know. He tried to take Holland down that one time, and then he just kind of gave up. He's like, never mind. We're just gonna keep striking, even though I'm terrible at that.
And of course, Derek Lewis knocking out Marcus.
I wasn't even mad. I got that one wrong. Wasn't even mad about it. That was awesome.
Yeah, me
he
either.
He pulled a
Jorge Masvidal.
Exactly. Yeah, at the BMF title fight. Ironically enough.
Exactly. So he breaks the knockout record finally. So props to him. Cool. Maybe that rejuvenates the latter half of his career. Maybe he can make one final run at the belt that's kind of eluded him. He gets so close and then he gets pushed back every single time. But he's always going to be a guy that's an exciting fighter that's going to put it out there with his striking, and he does it for the people. He's fun to watch.
And of course, Bobby Green getting a submission. Fucking what was that? But it was Tony Ferguson, so there was really no obstacle there. I think everybody expected
up until that third round, it was exciting. Like Ferguson, even though I still had Green winning, Ferguson was putting it into it, and he was hitting him with some deep shots. And I was like, round three, I was like, maybe it's 1-1, and maybe it's a very close 2-0. Bobby Green, but then
I felt like Green was like mostly getting hit because of his own incompetence. Like he kept his hands too low and he wouldn't really guard. And he was a little off that night, so the speed wasn't there, I think.
Well,
so I think that's what
like,
made Ferguson have a fighting chance.
And like we said, that was the thing going into it was I thought he kind of mirrored Ferguson with the hands down low, not showing any defense kind of a strategy to allow him to throw a lot more. And it worked a lot more for Bobby Green than it did Ferguson, especially in round 3. That's where Bobby Green's cardio was showcased once again. It's always round 3.
Oh, true.
You can tell that Bobby Green, he has cardio for days. He can go 3, 4, 5 rounds and strike because he doesn't. Because I don't think he puts everything into his shots. I think he just a lot of times is just touching you and go. But because Ferguson was so tired, he was able to go to that jiu-jitsu. He was able to just lock in that late
arm triangle.
And with 5 seconds left.
And it's funny because he had it deep and he was sitting there and I was watching. I was like, dump your hips. You got to dump your hips on the other side. And then eventually he's like, oh yeah, I got to dump my hips on the other side. It took him like
I'm watching it in real time. I'm like, did he get it or did he just not tap out? And then the round ended because they didn't tell you. And with me not having the sound on at the time, I couldn't tell. And then they're holding his hand up, and I had to go to the app, and it said submission. I was like, oh, they called it early. I was like, I just couldn't tell because how the ref was moving him off. He didn't move him off like he had it. He just moved him off like the end of the round was done.
Yeah, I knew he had it once he got to one side. Like he was like kind of on top of you. You can't really get ahead an arm triangle like that. You got to get to the side. If you really want to make it tight, you got to start kind of walking around so that you're more like angular, like perpendicular almost, to really sink it in. But I think he's just not really used to that. So I feel like he got it. And then he was like, oh, I got it. But he didn't think about like, oh, wait, I need to tighten it up. And I think that's what took him so long. But good for him. Like, how long has it been since Bobby Green got a submission? You know? Like,
forever. But before we get started with the UFC Nashville, we got 12 fights on this fight night card, which is going to take place at Bridgestone Arena in downtown Nashville. Of course, let's put a shout out to our social media pages. Of course, we're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch. You see Cage IQ for Twitter, Cage My IQ for Instagram, same thing for YouTube, and then for Twitch, it's at Bloodline ENT, and of course, we're part of the Bloodline Entertainment Network's core of podcast shows. You can find all Bloodline Entertainment on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Twitch at Bloodline ENT. So please do us a favor. Subscribe to all the channels, especially the YouTube channel, and give us a follow as well. And then please smash the like button down below on this video and hit us up in the comment section with your picks and predictions for UFC Nashville. And of course, we have merch out now. All you gotta do is go to fightersfirst.shop, go to the Cage My IQ collection, and get one of our new shirts with the sword and shield logo. We got it in white, green, and gray. And if you want to check out any of this stuff at fightersfirst.shop, they got anywhere from MMA to jiu-jitsu to wrestling merchandise there. Check it all out. Mike Ginn's your guy. Give him a follow on fightersfirst.shop's page on Twitter and on Instagram. But definitely check out one of our shirts right there. But other than that, let's get started with the action here. The first fight that we have on the prelims is wrong one.
That's not the right one.
Is a men's flyweight matchup between O'Day Osborne versus Asu Almabayev. We got Osborne, the plus 125 underdog. We got Almabayev, who is the minus 150 favorite. What are your thoughts on this fight?
You know, it's a little weird looking at those stats, especially considering like O'Day Osborne for the long time has really been kind of a pillar in the flyweight division. He's one of those guys. He's kind of like Olenek, you know, for the heavyweights. He would always be that gatekeeper. Sometimes he would edge up into that 15 spot, but for the most part, he'd kind of hang out at like the 16 to 18 range. And that would be the guy you kind of got to get past to, you know, get a shot at getting a ranked fighter, you know? So I feel like Osborne over his career, even though he hasn't been in the UFC that long, you've definitely seen a lot of improvement. He's really rounded out. His volume is pretty much been decent since the get-go, but he's become a lot more technical with his striking. He does kind of keep his guard a little bit open, a little bit wide, not super great guard discipline, but I think he makes up for it because there's always something coming at you. So other fighters don't usually get as much chance to take advantage of the openings he leaves. And of course, he can go to the wrestling kind of whenever he needs it. He's very good up on the cage. He can hit those takedowns, do a little jiu-jitsu when he needs to, but he's more of a stand-up guy. Sometimes his chin isn't there, I think he gets a little too trigger happy with the flying knees. It sets him up to, get into some trouble, especially, it seems like his chin's taking some battle damage. So you got to cover that as much as you can as you get older in this sport, especially if you don't want to be, getting knocked out all the damn time. But even so, he's already proven he belongs in the UFC, right? This Almabayev guy, I couldn't find really much of anything on him because he's from such a small fight league. He's from Brave FC, which I think is one of the fight leagues under UFC's umbrella, but it's one of the smaller ones. It's not a Cage Warriors. It's not an LFA, like where some of the bigger names come from. And this is his debut. And Ode Osborne, for a guy who's largely unknown, is kind of a hard draw. Like it's not a Magomed Ankalaev, or not Ankalaev, Makayev. It's not Makayev, but it's going to be a tough fight for him. I couldn't really find any tape on him. I know he has a 17-2 record. He only has 2 losses early in his career with his 5th and 6th fight, and after that he got on to like a 13 fight win streak, I think it is right now. And to be fair, one of those losses was actually to Tajir Limbekov, which we already know is kind of a name in the flyweight division right now. But that was kind of earlier in his career, so maybe he wasn't ready for that at the time. But he's mostly a submission specialist. He also has quite a few decisions, 8 submissions, 6 decisions, and only 3 KOs. That tells me a lot about his game. I can see he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player, so that's probably where he wants the fight to go. He's probably a guy who wants to crowd, get the fight to the cage, and then hunt for those takedowns, try to work that submission game as much as he can. If he can't do it, then that would explain why he's largely a decision fighter. I think the hands are mostly just there to create openings, close distance, to create those takedowns. If he can't get you down, he'll just grind you out on the cage. But that's nothing Ode Osborne hasn't seen before. And that's really nothing Ode Osborne doesn't do himself in a lot of cases. Like if he doesn't feel like he can get the rhythm going, he can always rely on his wrestling, which is pretty decent at this point in his career. So it's a little strange to me that Mabayev is the favorite here.
Yeah, he utilized it a little bit against Charles Johnson. That's what helped him kind of like break any momentum that Johnson would get in that fight. And I love the fact that he's been training, of course, with Aljamain Sterling and Rob right now for this camp. For this camp, he went with them. If you're watching the pay-per-view, he was sitting with them. You look at the IG account; it shows him training with them, working with the jiu-jitsu and the grappling side of things, because that's where Almabayev is going to be. Strength is that, and he's very limited though with the striking. So Almabayev is going to constantly pressure forward with that jiu-jitsu sambo style that he rocks both together, and he's going to look to take you down and, just like he said, hunt for submissions, hunt for top guard, control his opponent, and let them make a mistake in order for him to capitalize on it. And Ode Osborne has a 72% takedown defense. So he's not
really good at staying on his feet.
So he's not very easy to take down. So he's going to, in my opinion, stuff a lot of those takedowns. He might get taken down once or twice within the 3 rounds, but he's going to do a great job of stuffing those takedowns, get the striking going. He can knock you out. The one weakness has been his chin. He got knocked out by Tyson Nam and Manel Kape, but that's not going to be something. It's not going to be something that he's going to have to worry about with Almabayev, considering the limited amount of striking that he uses. So I think he's going to be very confident on his feet with the movement. He's going to throw at Almabayev. He's going to land a lot of combinations. I think it's going to go to the decision, and he's going to win the decision easily. As long as he can stay on the feet as much as possible. The longer the fight goes to the ground, the less it takes away from his striking and his confidence. But I feel like he's going to be doing good. He's going to defend the takedowns. He's going to land the volume. It's going to be enough to outdo Almabayev's grappling, especially if he's able to get 2 to 3 takedowns. I think the volume's just going to be too much for it. I would have thought that it would have been flip-flopped to where Ode Osborne would have been minus 150 and Almabayev would have been plus 125, but I'm not hating it because I'm going to attack that 125 mark there with him. I'm going to attack him with the money line, and then I'm going to go with the over 1.5 lines because I don't think that he gets a knockout, but I think he wins by decision. But you never know with these later rounds with certain guys getting tired and then getting hit, and maybe he could get a finish. But definitely do those two, especially with the lines that you get right now.
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, I think the volume is going to be a big factor. I think the takedown defense is going to be a big factor. It might also be worth your while to try to play the live odds a little bit here because it looks like, according to his record, Almabayev typically has his best rounds later on. Like second round seems to be his best round. Third round is like second best. If he can't quite get you there, sometimes he'll be able to catch you in a mistake later on. So the over 1.5 makes a lot of sense. If you play the live odds, I think that when he's fresh, he might have a better performance, just constantly pressuring, hunting for those takedowns. I don't think they're gonna be super successful. I think Ode Osborne's gonna stuff them. But if he's trapped on the cage and not producing volume, then I think Almabayev may take that first round, and we might see a bit of a swing in the odds a little bit. But well, I mean, it depends. So I think the money line here is good to start with. If you're playing the live odds, maybe after that second, we might see something better than plus 125 once Ode Osborne gets going again, gets his volume there. But yeah, I think the over 1.5 rounds makes the most sense for sure.
And just for instance, with the Jovic Fajeda fight, after round 1, Alex Fajeda was plus 400 on the money line live. So I know a lot of people went there and doubled down on that live money line there and cashed in big time when he won by split decision.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the second fight. This one actually got added just last night after 2 of his fights got canceled in the last couple weeks. We got a men's featherweight matchup between Sean Woodson versus Moran Santos. There is not a money line out right now, but I can double check as we go. But what are your thoughts on this matchup? I can only assume Woodson is the favorite.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's pretty open and shut. Like you had I texted you about this one last night because I thought they were scrapping the bout because Butler backed out on 6 days notice. And of course, nobody's going to touch that. So they pulled up this poor kid out of the minors. And what's he going to say? No, I don't want my shot at the UFC. So, of course he took it. But at the same time, Woodson is a big, long boy for the division. He's got pretty good boxing. I think Woodson has a lot of growth still to do. I see some issues with his game, particularly his legs are so skinny. Every time you kick his calves, his legs fly out from under him practically. So he needs to get better at kind of defending the lower body. He could work on, his gas tank a little bit. Some fights he kind of burns himself out going into the third round. He isn't the strongest grappler. Also, this is him coming off of a year break. So I think that maybe helps even things out, given that Santos is coming out of LFA, 6 days notice. He has 13-1 record, mostly a KO decision fighter, 7 KOs, 6 decisions. But I don't think there's any threat of a strong grappler here to throw Woodson off. So I think it's going to be an easy slam dunk. Woodson is probably going to take this one. Because he had such a change up in the opponents, it's probably safe to go with the decision on this one. But there is always that possibility he could just outwork him because Santos is not used to this level of competition. And he could get a late, maybe second, third round knockout. But yeah, because this is in such flux, you don't even know what the money line is. I think only the over 1.5 rounds is the safe bet here. I think Woodson is a slow starter. That's historically the way he goes. He kind of, mostly sits behind his jabs and takes reads in the first round. So if you're going over 1.5, you're pretty safe knowing that there's going to be a second, probably a third round. Even if he has a finish, it's going to be in the later half of the second. So over 1.5 makes sense, but I mean, you can't even go off of anything else because, again, 6 days notice. Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, and then on top of that, Woodson has a 3-inch height advantage and a 7-inch reach advantage, which is huge. So he's going to be able to hit Santos from a distance, where Santos is going to have to get inside of Woodson to land anything that he wants. And I'm always the one to go with the veteran here in these matchups. And on top of it, he's the one that's going to be more battle tested ready. Santos is taking it with less than a week left until the fight. He took it on Monday night, of course, and then the fight is Saturday afternoon, more than likely. So it's going to be only 5 days to be prepared for it. And yeah, even though he's been training, he hasn't been training specifically for Sean Woodson, who has the bigger reach, bigger height. He's going to be able to hit him from different angles and likely has more power. Moran Santos does have knockout power. He has 4 or 5 finishes on his under his belt, but it's going to be harder to get inside on a guy and then knock him out. So I'm going with Sean Woodson here. I think he gets it done later in rounds 2 or 3, especially with Santos more than likely to put a lot into round 1. That's what you see these guys doing when they're taking on short notice. They'll put in the whole kitchen sink at the round 1 to try and get the fight taken care of then. And then afterwards, they start to slow down tremendously. And that's where Sean Woodson has the opportunity to just kind of go slow, be patient round 1, take whatever is thrown at him, don't overdo it. And then once Santos does what he has to do, then you can take over and get your game going with no pressure and no urgency, as long as you don't get hit big time to where Santos has a big round. So I'm going with that. When it comes to betting, we don't know what the lines are yet. So I would say the best bet with that is to play the live odds on this one, especially since we won't know what they are until tomorrow or Friday. So definitely hit the live odds on this one and hope, like I said, that Moran Santos has a big first round and it kind of lowers the odds down. And then that's where Woodson will take over and you could get a better line on him, considering this one could be one of those ones that starts out with like minus 600 with Woodson, which is huge. And I would never bet on that for a guy like Woodson. So for me, I'm going to look at it when it's live. I'm not going to bet anything other than the live bet.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always the chance that the odds makers might be a little nervous, especially a guy on 6 days notice. So let's say the live odds come Thursday, Friday. Turns out Sean Woodson is a huge favorite. There might not be a big chance that, even if Santos has a big first, I think the odds makers might still be super nervous. Like, we've never seen this guy at this level. He's here with zero preparation. Just because he had a big first doesn't mean shit. Like, it's like Ilya Tapora and Jai Herbert. Like, so what Jai Herbert had a first round. He's up against Ilya Tapora, so, like, that don't matter. But, I mean, I guess that's all you could really do with this. It's kind of a shit situation.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next fight on this prelim. We got a men's flyweight matchup between Jake Hadley versus Cody Durden. Jake Hadley comes in the minus 180 favorite, and Cody Durden comes in the plus 150 underdog. What are your thoughts on this flyweight matchup?
This one's kind of interesting. These guys are similar, but I feel like Jake Hadley's kind of a version of Cody Durden, but he's a little more refined. Like, they have a lot of similar qualities. They both are good, strong wrestlers. They have good top control, although Hadley can fight from the top and from the bottom. When he goes on the bottom, he is good at hunting for submissions. He doesn't just kind of sit there and accept the position. Like in the, what was that? I can't even say his name. Nascimento. I think I said that right. Alan Nascimento fight. That was a lot of back and forth in the grappling. But you saw that Hadley isn't the fighter to just accept the bottom and then just kind of hope that, maybe the guy will slip into something or other. He can't do like a Paul Craig. Very few fighters can do what Paul Craig can do. So Hadley takes the initiative. I like that. I think between these two, I would probably give Hadley the power and the speed advantage in the hands. Durden is he's very, very dogged about hunting for those submissions, for the takedowns. So his wrestling on the cage is really good, which is a big reason why he's a decision fighter. He's only in the UFC one by finish one time, so that he's not great about finding those submissions. I think he gets the top control, and then he mostly just kind of settles in, maybe a little ground and pound here and there, but really he's more of a control fighter. And I think that's not going to work very well with Hadley's style. I think on the feet, Hadley's going to be too quick with his movement, putting too much power on Durden. I think that's going to make him nervous. It's going to cause Durden to shoot, but I don't think he's going to be able to get him down. Jake Hadley has pretty good takedown defense, but even if it goes to the floor, I'm confident Jake Hadley will go to the mat on his own terms. So he's not going to get caught in a vulnerable position necessarily, but he may go down to the mat specifically to try to turn the tables, get that back, and then set in for some ground and pound, maybe a submission here or there. I think Hadley's activity is going to be the key factor here that just sets him apart from Durden. So the odds are pretty close on this one. I could see Hadley taking it by decision just through activity because Durden does have a pretty good gas tank with all that wrestling. Or he could potentially get like a late knockout. I'm not sure if he's necessarily going to have as much luck in the submissions just because Durden does have a large gas tank, and I think he can maybe fight his way out of a lot of really sticky situations on the mat. But on the feet, I think he's going to get outstruck. I don't think we're necessarily going to be seeing the classic like two strong grapplers with too much respect and it becomes a slug match. I think Durden's going to want to try to get this into that wrestling range as quickly as possible. But at the same time, if he gets sloppy with those takedown attempts, that's the opening for Hadley to start piecing him up on the feet and potentially set up for a late KO, second, third round. I would definitely be playing over 1.5 rounds. That's a no-brainer. I think Durden might have a bit of a strong first, so you might see a bit of a swing in the live odds there, especially if he's able to actually take Hadley down. I don't think he'll be able to get him in trouble, but if Hadley's kind of scrambling on the mat, it kind of creates more of a toss-up. And if it looks like Durden is able to keep up, that might close that spread a little bit to make that money line worth it, or at least more worth it than it is now. But other than that, it's going to come down to, what does that first round look like in terms of whether or not I'd be comfortable betting on like a knockout prop bet sort of thing for Hadley.
Yeah, Hadley's going to be the favorite when it comes to the stand-up striking. I really like the fact that he attacks the body very well. Usually he'll throw one shot at the face and then he'll return the combo with a shot to the body. So he's always trying to hit not just one area. He's trying to soften up everything on his opponent. He'll throw a leg kick to mix that into it, to the calf kick. He's always trying to slow every part of his opponent's body down, which is the goal in MMA, is to slow them down and to land more. Whereas you got Cody Durden, who is heavy on the wrestling. The last fight out, I believe he had 11 takedowns on Charles Johnson, and then he had 4 in the fight before that. And then Mote, and he just dominated with the control time, dominated on the mat, and then didn't do as much. He's more of a control guy over offensive when he's on the mat. He's not trying to lose the position by throwing contact. He's trying to keep that position, keep everything in the dominant side, throw when he needs to keep it, to keep the ref from pushing them up, and then he'll move when he has to and throw. But it's not a lot of offense when he's on the mat. It's all about keeping the action where it's at and then do what he just needs to do just to win the time in the rounds. And then in one fight, he had 12 minutes against Mote with the 4 takedowns, and then he had only 9 against Johnson, because Johnson's the guy that can get up, can move around. You'll take him down again, but then he got back up again. But he was able to control him there and do some work. Like he only had like 80 strikes in that whole fight. All 3 rounds, and for 11 takedowns, that's not that much. Whereas you got Jake Hadley, who's not as great with the get-ups, but he's going to keep fighting. He's a good movement. He does have that grappling background as well. A lot of people don't know that because he doesn't use it because it's not as refined as his boxing background. It's just a little bit of secondary. He has 2 or 3 takedowns since coming into the UFC. He doesn't have much control time to go with it, but he's very quick with his hands, great movement. You saw the knockout that he had last fight, and then you saw the body shots that he was throwing against Candelario, who took Hadley down, but then Hadley was able to converse against that and beat him in the striking department. I feel like it's gonna this fight's gonna take place depend on who does what they want to do first. If Durden can take down Hadley and continue to do that, then it should be easy 3 rounds for Durden, because like you said, he has great cardio with the wrestling cardio and striking cardio are 2 different things. You can have great wrestling cardio, but shit striking cardio. Yes, it sounds crazy, but it's a thing. He has great wrestling cardio, but his striking is limited to overhand wide power shots that he uses to try and knock his opponents out. That's what's kind of limited to. He can throw a jab once in a while and a leg kick, but it's mainly he's throwing the overhand shots, and then sometimes he uses it to close the distance, to go duck on the inside and get his takedowns. Whereas Hadley, like we said, he can throw a jab, he can throw a hook, he can throw a body shot, uppercut, different types of looks with his striking, and then he can mix in a takedown or 2 just to throw people off of his boxing. And that's why I feel like he's the favorite in this one, is because of the more offensive moves in his repertoire, not just a big wrestling background that Durden has that puts him as a big favorite in majority of his matchups, because a lot of people can't deal with the constant pressure. But I think this isn't going to be a one that goes to decision. It might even go to split decision. And I'm going to lean towards Hadley, because I feel like he can do enough damage with his striking to slow down Durden, to keep him from doing the constant takedowns. I think Hadley will still get taken down 3 to 4 times, but I think the volume that he does will outweigh the control time and anything that the judges see from Durden, because he's not as active with his offensive side as Hadley will be. And we've seen a lot of fights. You can hold a guy down for 10 minutes, but if you don't do anything with it, another guy is throwing at you, they're going to lean towards the guy that's more active in that fight. Because if it's 80 to 10, but the guy with 80 strikes was taken down for 10 minutes, that 10 minutes is kind of nullified. So I'm going with Hadley by decision in this one. And I like the minus 180. I feel like that's going to go down a little bit more, because I see a lot of people going to Cody Durden with the wrestling. So I'm going to wait like a day or 2, see where that line goes. Hopefully it goes down a little bit more. And then I'm going to attack the line, and I'm going to go with the over 1.5 on this one.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I get the I guess the tempting to go with Durden because of the wrestling, but
yeah,
I think it's he's going to take too much damage trying to hunt for those takedowns too early on, because Hadley's got great movement, he's got good stance work, and his hands are really fast. So
yeah,
I think Cody Durden's going to have to eat a lot of punches to get those takedowns. He might get a couple, but at what cost? And I think over time that damage is going to accumulate, and it's going to be much easier for Hadley to take over, especially in the later rounds, for sure.
Yeah, and with the Hadley knowing that Durden doesn't have that a verse amount of striking, and it's basically limited to just a couple of things, he's going to try and take advantage of it. I expect to see a lot of body shots in this one. He's going to take the time to move around, hit him from different angles, hit him in the body, slow him down, mix in the leg kicks. I think they're just going to be calf kicks, because he's going to play it safe there, because he doesn't want Durden to catch his leg and to drive him down. And he's going to continuously move, and that's going to be the big thing. Continuously move to not give Durden the same straight ahead looks that he normally gets in his fights. So he doesn't rush from a distance and try and just drive him back into the cage and drive him down. So, yeah, that's why I like Hadley in this one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like Hadley's probably his potential is around a 10 to 15 ranked fighter. I think if he keeps evolving, he's definitely top 10. But for where he's at right now, Mohamed Makayev is 11, but, he's still on the upward rise. But he would be around Tajir Lembekov and David Dvorak, Simmer Dearji. Like, I think that's about where his skill level is right now. Definitely above where Cody Durden is. I don't see Cody Durden getting ranked anytime soon, really.
Let's move on to the next fight here. We got a men's welterweight matchup between Carlston Harris going up against Jeremiah Wells in the welterweight division. Wells is the minus 170 favorite, and Carlston Harris is the plus 140 underdog. What are your thoughts on this fight?
I don't have a whole lot to say about this. Harris, he's still kind of fairly new to the UFC. He seems pretty well-rounded. He's a bit of a brawler, right? He's a little sloppy with his hands, but that does allow him to generate a decent amount of power. One of the things I tell my guys when we're training and everything, circular movement generates momentum. Direct line shots generate power. Harris is more of the looping circular shot. So he generates a lot of momentum. So when it connects, it does do damage, but it's not super efficient. It leaves a lot of openings. It seems pretty decent in the wrestling on the cage, although he likes to really kind of stand and trade. I will say he's kind of a big guy for the division. He's pretty long, pretty lanky. But, I mean, Jeremiah Wells is an undefeated monster inside of the UFC for good reason. The guy's got crazy power in his hands. He is a bit brawlish, but I've noticed he is getting more technical as his fights go on. He does kind of like to swing, but he will set up those looping shots. He's not just going to throw them in isolation. I think that's how he's able to catch people so often and get all those knockouts. He has good movement on the feet, so he's hard to hit. A moving target is way harder to pen down than a stationary one. And of course, he has excellent wrestling as well. This guy's easily a top 10 quality fighter within the welterweights. I think, he's going to have almost unlimited potential as long as he keeps on the track he's going, continues to evolve. This guy is going to be a big name in the welterweights, bigger than he already is. I think a lot of people, even ranked fighters, are pretty afraid of taking a fight up with Jeremiah Wells. The only real issue he has right now that I think he needs to work on, he does get a little sloppy with the striking, like I said, with those looping shots. And it could kind of present a gas tank issue in the long run. Mostly he's finishing dudes really fast with all that power. But if you're putting everything you got into every shot, it drains your batteries real quick. So that's something he's going to have to work on for the long run. But against Harris, I think Harris, it looks like he's, in time he could maybe be like, 15 to 20 ranked fighter, but I think he's outmatched here. And it's really hard to bet against Jeremiah Wells, given his record, given his skills. I think Wells can either take this by knockout or by like a knockdown and then jump on his back to a submission real quick. But I think he's probably going to finish this in the first or second. This is the only one where, I would probably go under 1.5, maybe, just because of his track record. He finishes fast. It's always first or second. That one, it could go either way. That's kind of the trick with it. But you could definitely be a lot safer with finishing inside the distance. Right now, the money line is pretty close, so it could be worth it to play on that. Especially right now, I think as we get closer and more people start going for Wells, I think that gap is going to get wider, and eventually it's not really going to be worth getting the money line. So chase that now. But yeah, that's mostly how I'd play this.
Yeah, and you look at the last fight that he had against Matthew Semmersberger, and that was a very true test for him. A guy that had more power than him, was more accurate with that power, and he got stunned twice. But he was able to kind of like adjust his game plan, stop throwing those wide shots, because he was throwing the wide shot, and then Matthew Semmersberger would just go straight on in and hit him every time. And then he just adjusted to it and was able to stay within it, because he had two scenarios where he almost got finished, but he was able to recover, get himself going, move around, buy himself time, and then he went right to the wrestling, where he had 6 takedowns. So maybe you might see a little bit more of a wrestling attack this time around, because when he uses that wrestling, he's very dominant with that. That every time he would go for a takedown, he was able to get it, because he'd act like he was going with the left overhand, and he'd just duck under, catch Semmersberger swinging, and then he'd just drive him down and hold him on the mat, because he has great top guard, and he was able to just hold him, do a little bit of damage, hold him a little bit more. Whenever Semmelsberger would move, he'd move with them, and he did a great job of keeping his position. And Carson Harris, he's a pretty good striker. He's not much of a finisher. He does have a couple finishes in the last 5 fights. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is he has a pretty decent jiu-jitsu background. He hunts for submissions. He likes to take the back. But I'm just with you on this one. I think he gets it done round 1 by knockout. I think the power is going to be a big thing here. He's going to push the pace. He's going to start out fast. I think the wrestling is going to outdo the jiu-jitsu side. I see Carson Harris as a guy that gets taken down pretty easily. You look at the one on the fights that he lost, of course, with Shavkat. He didn't do a great job of defending.
The Shavkat, you know?
Yeah, but he didn't do a good job of blocking his face. And Jeremiah Wells is going to be a guy that's just going to swing wide, and those are going to have a good connection rate on Carson Harris. And Jeremiah Wells is going to give him different looks of going up and then driving down, or acting like he's about to drive down and then swing wide. He's going to show the different angles with him. So I see this being a first round knockout. I like the under 1.5 as well on this one, because I think it'll be done in the first round. And if it's not, at least in the top half of the second round. If you look at just the background of Jeremiah Wells and his fights, you would see the same thing. A lot of his fights end early, except for the last one, but that was a true test of him gutting it out and coming back from behind. But if you feel like maybe he'll start out slow, just like he did against Matthew Semmelsberger, then you can go live with this one. But then you're kind of fighting with the issue that Jeremiah Wells has with his gas tank. He doesn't have one of the best gas tanks, and that's another reason he went for the takedowns as well, is because he has a great gas tank with his grappling, not so much with the striking. So it's like you're battering yourself on that one there. So I would play Jeremiah Wells. I'd play the money line right now before it gets any higher. I'll look at the under 1.5. And I'll also look at the by KO, TKO, or DQ prop there, because you're definitely going to get plus odds on those ones as well.
For sure. This one's pretty open and shut, I feel like.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next fight on the prelims. Before we get to that, once again, if you're tuning in for the first time to the channel, please smash the like button down below and hit us up in the comment section with your thoughts and predictions for UFC Nashville. And we're doing bet odds with this as well. So let us know what are some of your favorite prop bets for this weekend are going to be. But let's move on to this featherweight matchup. We got Billy Quarantino, a.k.a. Billy Q, going up against Damon the Leech Jackson. Billy Q is the minus 175 favorite. Damon Jackson's the plus 140 underdog. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
This one's kind of interesting because these guys are kind of each other's weaknesses, you know? Like, you got Billy Q. He's a veteran of the sport at this point, but he's definitely a brawler. He's got the power in his hands, but he likes to keep his hands down near his balls. He keeps himself open all the time, and as a result, he takes a ton of damage in his fights. Like, his face looks like a piece of meat as soon as he walks out of the cage, either through swelling or just the amount of blood that he's bleeding. Versus Jackson, he's primarily a strong grappler. That's really where most of his wins have come by. 15 submissions versus his 4 knockouts and 3 decisions. So you pretty much know what his game plan is going to be. And these two game plans kind of oppose each other. Like, you got Jackson, who's going to want to take it to the ground pretty quick. He's sometimes is okay with standing and trading, but I think between the two of them, Billy Q is probably a little more technical, probably a little bit better power, just from sheer experience, doing that particular activity alone. But I think when it goes to the mat, it's all Jackson. Billy Q usually has, pretty good takedown defense as like kind of an extension of a fairly decent wrestling ability that he's acquired over the years. But I don't think it's better than Jackson's. And this makes it kind of a very easy road to victory. Well, not easy, but more direct road to victory for Jackson, I think, because really all he has to do is do what he does best. close distance, get to the cage, and just start hunting for those takedowns. Even if he doesn't find them at first, he's still putting points on the scorecards. When he does tend to find them, that's when he really gets to work. He, gets on top, finds the back, and then he starts hunting for those submissions. Very active in the ground game as far as looking for a finish there. I think the only thing that could possibly stop him is that Billy Q is, regardless of the fact that he takes a ton of damage, he is able to keep a pretty crazy pace until, it's kind of roll of the dice. Either he breaks or his opponent does. Whoever tires out first, that tends to be the one who gets the short end of the stick here. But at the same time, I feel like most of Billy Q's stamina is in the stand-up. He's very durable. He's willing to eat one to give one. But if you force him into a 15-minute grappling match, I think he's going to tire out a little bit faster, especially if he's constantly having to problem solve the way that Damon Jackson is going to be making him think on his feet when he's in those grappling exchanges. It's not going to be just hold him against the cage or lay and pray. No, he's going to be constantly having to find his way out of things, constantly fighting to get back to his feet, and that all costs energy. I could see this going the way of Billy Q catching a knockout on Jackson. It would have to be probably in the second round when he's still kind of fresh. He's taking those reads. But I think it's probably going to be easier for Jackson to hunt for those takedowns, get Billy Q down, just grind him out until he reaches the end of his gas tank, and then probably take the submission, maybe a late submission in the third round. But yeah, I think a lot of this will come down to kind of how that first round and a half turns out, because we'll be able to see who's primarily in the driver's seat in this fight. Usually Billy Q is a little bit slow to start, so I think Damon Jackson might have a stronger first round there. But you never know. It always depends on which version of that fighter shows up to fight night, right? But just because I feel like the job for Jackson is a little bit easier in terms of his game plan is a little easier to execute because there's more room for mistakes. Billy Q has to fight more of a perfect fight than Jackson, so I would go Jackson by decision. If you're feeling confident, maybe take that prop bet for submission. But yeah, if you want to think of it like Jackson versus Archuleta, I think is kind of a blueprint for how this fight is going to go. In that fight, Jackson got caught a couple times. He got wobbled, almost finished once, but he was able to power through, just force the wrestling situations, recover, and ultimately grind out a hard decision. I think that's probably what we're looking at here. So I think it's pretty no-brainer, over 1.5 rounds. Both of these guys really don't have very many first-round finishes. Even Jackson's submission finishes tend to come a little later in the fight, so you'd probably be pretty safe there. Take the plus money that they're giving you on Damon Jackson early right now before that gap separates, or, of course, if Damon Jackson gets a strong first, then it's probably going to swing the odds away from him. So those seem a little volatile here. But if you want to also bet on this going the distance, that could also be a pretty safe bet.
There's a lot of things looking into this fight that has me worried on both sides. First, you got Damon Jackson. He's been knocked out by Dan Ige. He got knocked out by Ilya Topuria, which is, of course, he got submitted by Yancy. He got Yancy submitted by Yancy Medeiros, who's not even in the UFC anymore. And then he's had some wins that have been well, but it seems to lose to guys with good striking. It can put a lot of output and then add a little bit of power to it, which sounds like Billy Q, where Billy Q can get off of a lot of output, just like you said. One of the things he does is he doesn't block his face as much because it allows him easy access to striking on his opponent. But then on the other side, you got Billy Q. You look at him and he's been able to be taken down a lot in fights. You look at Gavin Tucker fight, he got taken down 7 times. You got Hernandez, he got taken down twice, which he did win that because he had 2. And then there's other fights within that where he got taken down twice here, twice there. He's not held down that much. I think Gavin Tucker only had 5 minutes of control time, but he was able to utilize that with a lot of action on the mat from a striking standpoint. We don't know how Billy Q is going to react getting taken down by Damon Jackson, more of a jiu-jitsu artist, where he's going to be not hunting for striking, he's going to be hunting for a position to submit him, to take his neck, and look for different spots to do that, because that's Damon Jackson's specialty there. But then on the other side, we got to see how Damon Jackson's going to do defending the strike into the head, because he just got annihilated by Dan Ige in that matchup. And within the striking game, Damon Jackson, he can throw a decent jab and then a decent overhand strikes. That's about it. He utilizes a lot of that to get inside the clinch. Whereas Billy Q does a lot of movement. He has a lot of wide angles of striking. He's always high output in fights. He's not necessarily going to finish you. If you look at some of the stats here, he has
he's
a
kind
KO
of a win-loss record for a while now.
Yeah. He loses by KO to Barbosa. He won by KO to Hernandez. He lost a decision to Barbosa in a great fight. Both had over 350 strikes. He beat Benitez by KO late in that fight. That was pretty back and forth. He lost to Tucker. He beat Nelson by KO very late. He beat Spike Carlisle, who had 3 takedowns on him, and then he had 2. And then he beat Kilburn by triangle choke and Kamel Kirk by KO punches. And a lot of his KOs and finishes are late in the fight, late in round 2, beginning of round 3. So he's a slow starter, and he gets going. And what I've seen from Damon Jackson is he starts out quick and then he slows down. So it's like, if you're going to play from both angles, I could see a thing where Damon Jackson's path to victory is a submission very early in the fight, whereas Billy Q, I could see him finishing Damon Jackson later when he ramps up and then he starts to slow down. My thing here is I'm going to pick Billy Q because I have seen him getting taken down, recover from it, and then get his game going with when he fought Hernandez and Spike Carlisle. And then it seems to make him want to wrestle a little bit. I've seen him get in fights where he's gotten 4 takedowns in this one, 2 in this one, 2 in this one, and he only uses it when he's in when he needs to. Like if he's in like a predicament and he needs to get out of it, he digs to the grapple and then he takes his opponent down. If it's more of a 50-50, that might be a thing that plays a factor into this one to kind of avoid the jiu-jitsu. Maybe he takes him down and then he gets up. Just to get the position and then to break things up to a stand-up fight. But I think that high output is going to be a big factor. I think he's going to land too much for Damon Jackson's grappling to do a thing because he's not active on the ground, minus the submission attempts. And I could see Billy Q just doing enough to defend the takedowns, somehow get up and land a lot of shots that are very potent to Damon Jackson. I'm going to go with a round 3 knockout for Billy Q. I think he gets it done like he always does. I like the minus 175 here. I think you got to get it while you can because a lot of people have been jumping on him in the last couple of days. I like the over 1.5 because I think Damon Jackson is going to do a great job with the grappling early. And that's where Billy Q is going to have to just fight that and then be patient in the fight to take over in round 2 and 3. And if you want to, definitely take a chance at the live bet because, like I said, with Damon Jackson being a quicker starter than Billy Q, you might be able to get that minus 175 at more even odds after round 1.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, like I said, they're each other's weaknesses in a lot of ways. So this is a very volatile matchup. This really is kind of anything could happen. Yeah, I don't know. Like I usually tend to favor the wrestlers a little bit more just because of how wrestling tends to work, like its mechanics.
Yeah.
As long as you can get close, you essentially create your own world. Whereas striking requires the opposite. Usually need to maintain distance. You're in a finite space. You're in a cage. There's a certain point at which you don't have space anymore. So that's mainly why I'm looking at Jackson, is because all he really has to do is just press. And I've seen Damien Jackson eat shots just to get close. And I think he can do it again. That's why I pointed out the Archuleta fight. He had a lot of shots in that one, but he kept going. He kept walking forward and he found, the edge of the ring. He found that cage and he found those takedowns. It will ultimately it will be decided by like how well Billy Q can maintain that distance. And if he can make Jackson respect his power, which for a wrestler is hard. Like wrestlers can take a lot. And like Jackson has kind of like a jiu-jitsu heavy, but like he's picked up the wrestling as he's gone along. But the dude can definitely take a shot. I don't think he's good. It's going to take a lot for him to back off, especially if he knows that's the way to win. I think he's just going to be a dog and just keep going. So I think Billy Q, in order to really get some momentum, he's going to have to start fast and he's going to have to start hard to make Jackson respect that power and create that gap so that he can really get a striking going. Because I think if it's constantly get down, get up, get down, get up, get down, get up, that will drain his batteries. He does have pretty good wrestling. I'd be interested to see how he does like wrestling for wrestling. I feel like Jackson is probably a little more refined, but Billy Q has done some crazy shit in the past. So you never know. Maybe he just like busts out some shit we haven't seen before. And if you're following the pattern right now, it's lose, win, lose, win, lose against Edson Barbosa. So he's slated to win, I guess, if he maintains the pattern. So I don't know. Maybe that helps boost your confidence a little there. But man, this one, I'd be nervous about putting some money on.
It's definitely tough, but I like the fact that it's a very high volume from Billy Q. It's not like okay, he might get 50 strikes. You just look at the past one that he had with Ige. Ige had 190 strikes, and then he had 165. So it was just the battle of a guy hitting more with him because it was going to be more of a striking battle. But he's known for landing a lot and then the gun it through 2-3 rounds, and he can go for all 3 rounds. It's just that Ige was the quicker guy at the end. I'm not saying Billy Q has bad cardio. It's just that one of these guys' cardio is going to have an effect on the fight in high output, and it was his by a little bit. And it was still a close fight. I felt like it was more like a split decision type of situation, because a lot of Ige's strikes in that one were, I think, in round 3, whereas Billy Contino had a quick start in the beginning, which was kind of odd because he's usually a slow start on fights. But I could definitely see it going either way. I like the cardio of Contino better than Jackson, and I think the high output could play a factor in negating the takedowns of Jackson because he's not accurate. I mean, he's not active on the ground. He's active in looking for submissions. He just doesn't throw a lot when he's on the mat. And I think judges look at that a lot, and they don't like the fact that you're not active. So he could take him down for 3 rounds, like I said in the last fight. And if Quarantino throws a lot and has like a 20 punch advantage, the judges are going to go with the guy that's striking over the guy that just lays down and holds his opponent on the mat. It's just how the judges have been going lately.
Yeah. I mean, also, if Saul Diamato's in there, that could fuck the whole thing up. Like
that too.
God, do not like that, Bridge.
Let's move on to the next fight on the prelims. We got a bantamweight battle between Raoni Barcelos versus Kyler Phillips. Raoni is the plus 145 underdog, and Phillips is the minus 175 favorite. What are your thoughts on this fight?
I think Phillips is kind of an underrated fighter because he's a relatively newcomer. He is a little too flashy for his own good sometimes, but he is a decent striker. He's got, good movement. I think he can bring power when he needs to. He's very good at changing gears. He can go from striking to wrestling to jiu-jitsu pretty flawlessly. Like he's really rounded out as a fighter. I still don't like that he keeps throwing those stupid spinning kicks for like no reason. There's very specific context in which you throw a spinning kick. I think he just does it for the highlight reel, which that's going to get him in trouble for sure. But is true to form. His first round is always very full of activity. He's got crazy output in the first. Historically, he has slowed down. He has a bit of a gas tank issue in that department. Although in his last fight against Marcel Rojo, he actually maintained that pace pretty well throughout the entire 3 rounds. I think that one he got, it was a submission triangle in the very 3rd round. It was kind of early in the 3rd, but he wasn't slowing down. And a big part of the reason he got that triangle is he was able to keep his cardio there, because I think what Rojo was trying to do was let him kind of gas him out or let him gas himself out and then, kind of go harder in the later rounds. But I don't think he was expecting Kyler Phillips to still be there in round 3 and still be doing all that activity, still be doing all that output. So that, to me, shows a lot of evolution. I think it is worth noting he hasn't been in the octagon in about a year and a half. So there is kind of a wild card. What has he been doing in that year and a half? If he's been training and maintaining at the very least, maybe growing a little bit, then I think we're just going to see a better version of Kyler Phillips than we saw against Rojo. If he's been sitting on the couch, eating Twinkies, then, we might see more of the old Phillips where he has good first round and then he kind of really tapers off after that. And, that lack of stamina kind of gets him in trouble, just like it did against the Paiva, Raulian Paiva. That one ended in a close decision. I think it was a majority decision, but it was mostly because he just couldn't keep up with the pace. Now, Barcelos, he doesn't have like a super long record inside of the UFC. He is coming off of a string of losses. He had in his last 4 fights, 3 of those were 2 decisions and 1 knockout. The knockout was Umar Nurmagomedov. Kind of makes sense. The other 2 losses were Victor Henry and Timur Valiev. Timur Valiev, of course, being a very good, top control, high pressure fighter. Kind of makes sense how he was able to kind of ground out Barcelos. Victor Henry, I'm not sure what his excuse is there. He did beat Trevin Giles, but it was by decision, Trevin Jones by decision. I saw that fight. I didn't see anything super impressive. I think he's too focused on the counter game, and he has more of a flat-footed Muay Thai style, and that greatly decreases his output. Having that against a guy like Phillips who has a lot of output, I think is not good for the scorecards. Yes, you could find that big counter shot, put him in a lot of trouble, and maybe finish him, but I think that's a lot to hope for versus Phillips, who is going to be, moving a lot, putting out a lot of motion, putting a lot of volume, giving him different looks. I think that's going to be a lot for Barcelos to read and focus on. And he's going to fall behind in the cards, I think. Like I said, I'm kind of looking at Phillips's evolution and what we've seen lately because, the holes in his game have definitely been there for most of his career. But based on that last fight, I want to hope that he's been, doing what he's supposed to do to maintain that, maybe even get a little bit better. So this one is again, it's kind of hard to bet on just because that gap of that 1.5 years, we don't know what he's going to be like. Because right now, Kyler Phillips is the wild card. There's a reason he's the favorite because if he shows up, he's going to dominate. But if he doesn't, he'll gas out, and then Barcelos will grind him out in the later rounds. So it'd probably be safe to go decision. Decision could go either way. I am kind of leaning towards Phillips. Definitely over 1.5. You could probably bet this one going the distance, seeing as Barcelos isn't like a big knockout guy. He's more of like a, counter striker, which tends to lead to more decision victories than knockouts, unless you're like Israel Adesanya, But yeah, I think Barcelos does like to get to the ground. He likes to get dirty, but I think Kyler Phillips's activity in his wrestling is probably going to be good enough to at least stall him out. Again, if he shows up, that's kind of the big caveat here. He's got to show up to the fight, But yeah, this one I could see going either way by decision.
Yeah, looking at Phillips, he has 3 canceled fights in the last year and a half. That's why he hasn't fought. He was supposed to fight Jack Shore. Jack Shore got hurt. Then he was supposed to where is it? And then he was supposed to fight. I know the last one was Jack Shore. It was Rafael Sunsao. That's where Kyler Phillips got hurt. And then it was Syed Nurmagomedov today. On Saturday. And then Syed Nurmagomedov backed out. And then Randy Barcelos took this fight on short notice. Not like short, but like a month.
Means he's probably been training. Like he had to be in training camp for those fights.
So on a month's notice. So it's not as bad. He at least has a month to train for it, which is still a lot of time for him. So it's not too bad of it. But you got Kyle Phillips, who's more about starting out fast. He puts a lot in that round 1. He's an explosive striker from fighting from a distance. He has that capoeira. He has that kickboxing style. He's good with his hands. He has great movement. He throws a lot of leg kicks from different angles. Like you said, you see a lot of that with him. And he pushes the pace. And then the only thing is, the weakness is he's had an issue with tiring out after like the 2-3 minute mark of round 2 and then into round 3. He starts to slow down. That's kind of what beat him in the Raulian Paiva fight, even though I still think that he should have at least drew the fight because of the 10-8 first round. But then you have Barcelos, who on paper should be able to compete with them. But just like you said, he's a guy that either shows up or he doesn't. He does have decent power in his hands. He has that Muay Thai background. He has good striking, but it's like he doesn't put the pen to paper half the time when he's in the octagon. And like whether he's distracted or not, he just doesn't put the performance out there. You look at the last couple of fights for Barcelos. Umar Nurmagomedov finished him in the first round where he just looked horrendous. He did beat Trevin Jones by the decision where he got the knockdown, but he was kind of more content on, like you said, countering. He got a decision by Victor Henry. He gave up over 180 strikes there. And then Timur Valiev, who is on the Ultimate Fighter right now because he lost his position.
He's looking really good, by the way. He's coming back something fierce.
Rainy Barcelos had 2 knockdowns in that one and 65 strikes, and he still lost by a majority draw. And then the fight before that, he beat Khalid Tafa, and that was kind of a stretch of 5 fights that he had winning to start out in the UFC, where he was showcasing his power, getting the knockdowns and fights and utilizing that range. And he just lost it to guys that are a good grappler or a combination of grappling and striking. And he's just kind of lost his confidence. And I think even though he lost the one fight to Paiva, I think Phillips still has that confidence. He just hasn't fought because of injuries and situations that he can't control. I think he's going to come in there, utilize that distance, use the leg kicks to keep him at range. He's going to throw those explosive strikes at Barcelos. And he's a guy that's more about volume than Barcelos is. I still think it could go to decision because Barcelos can take a hit at a lot of times. A lot of his losses are by decision. And I think that Umar Nurmagomedov one was just one of those ones that just happens because Umar is a big-time prospect.
Yeah, he's kind of a beast.
He was a monster. He was going to be challenging for the title any month now. And I think that Phillips wins round 1. Round 2, you might see Barcelos take over because Phillips might use round 2 to kind of like gain a little bit of that energy back, manage himself to see if he can still win the round, because that's what happened round 2 against Araujo. Like he didn't take round 2 off, but he was still more active. It's just that he didn't go balls out like he did round 1. And Rojo
he was better at managing his pace.
Yeah.
That's the key, I think, that he figured out.
And Rojo just made the decision to let him do it. And he lost round 2, and then Phillips spud back up to 4 strength at round 3, and then just got him there. So I see a little bit of the same thing. Phillips just has to watch out for one of those big-time shots from Barcelos, especially in round 3. But I'm going to go with Phillips by late submission or by decision. I think he might sneak in a rear naked choke here because that's a part of his game that people don't really think about, is the fact that he can grapple pretty well. He just hasn't had to use it as much in the past, but he's utilized it when he's had to. He just prefers to stand up from a distance and throw those high octane strikes that get people talking about the fight. So I like the money line there. I'm personally not going to go out there because with these 2 guys, you got one guy a year off in Phillips, and then the guy in Barcelos who just got rocked in his last fight. So you don't know how he's going to come in from a confidence standpoint. So I do like Phillips. I like the over and 1.5 line there, just like you said. And anything else, I might think decision would be a safe one. And then maybe just watch it live. See how it's going after round 1 and attack it live if you feel like you want to make a bet on it.
Yeah. I feel like maybe going the distance might be another good one just because Kyler Phillips, I think it's since he entered the UFC, let's see. Yeah, he's been kind of mostly decision. He's had 1-2 decisions and then 1 KO and 1 submission. So, it kind of depends because especially like early in his career, those knockouts and submissions had to come out that one knockout he got was in the second round, like 44 seconds in. So he got through the first and then managed to just eke it out. And then the other ones, he did manage to take the decision, but these, like Gabriel Silva, Song Yadong, these are much, much closer just because he did kind of peter out in those later rounds. I have confidence that I don't think he's going to do that this time. But, all it takes is for one of these guys to have a bad night, and, we could see a very different story playing out. So I want to be confident in Phillips, but it's kind of hard just because he's only done it once. Yeah. Once he does it twice, he's established a pattern. Now you can build confidence in that. That's why it's kind of tough for me to go either way on that decision. That's why the only thing I feel confident on is maybe it goes the distance, maybe that 1.5 rounds, and that's about it.
Yep. Let's move on to the main card. The first fight that we have on the main card is an immense lightweight matchup between Ignacio Bahamondes, who's going up against Ludwig Klein. You got Bahamondes, the minus 200 favorite, and then you got Klein, the plus 165 underdog. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, man, I like Bahamondes for this one. He's a big boy for the division. He's very tall, very long, and he's actually very strong. He kind of looks like a bit of a beanpole because of how much weight he has to cut to make that weight class. But I mean, he's actually very strong. He's got excellent takedown defense, not just from a technical standpoint. Also, being that big and long makes you kind of hard to take down. But the big thing is he's got good kickboxing. I like how he mixes it up. He goes pretty evenly head, body to the legs. He's constantly making you second guess, making you think, and then he sets you up for those big power shots, which he does have a decent bit of power in his hands. I think sometimes, especially early, like in round one, he's a little bit too focused on the counter game. You kind of got to rattle him a little bit, and then he's like, all right, it's time to get going. And then once he gets going, that's where his output, his volume really comes into play. Klein, I think, is mostly a decision fighter at this point because of his wrestling. He's an okay striker, but he is one of those guys who will stand for a little bit, and then once he figures out he's outclassed, he kind of wants to take it to the cage, maybe get it in a clinch situation, start hunting for those takedowns. But he's got a pretty big disadvantage in the size department here. I think his job is going to be way harder than he's used to, considering how big Bahamondes is, how much reach he has. He can touch Klein before Klein can close that distance, and he can put the power to him pretty good. I think even if Klein does get those clinches, I think it's going to be really hard to actually get Bahamondes down and hold him there. Bahamondes is also pretty good at just getting off the cage when he doesn't want to be there. He can also kind of mix it up with the knees and elbows, although that's not really his go-to game. And he's also got a pretty decent submission game. He doesn't use it very often just because he usually gets it done with the striking. But when he needs it, yeah, he can pull out a submission. So if Ludwig Klein gets him to the ground and gets sloppy, there's always that chance he could make a mistake, fall into something that, is there's no coming back from. So because there's so many options here for Bahamondes with his volume, with his ability to stay on the feet, if it does go to the ground, he can problem solve, or he could potentially pull out a submission. When you have a fighter with that many options, I think that bodes pretty well. So I would be looking at Bahamondes by decision, or depending on how that first round goes, if Ludwig Klein is accumulating a lot of damage, that might be a good time to hop on maybe a KO prop bet, maybe for the late second, early third round, something like that. But if it's just looking like Klein can't get past the hands, he's getting touched up with the jab, maybe catching some crosses, then it's probably going to be more of a low output fight for Bahamondes relative to what he can usually do. So that's why I'd feel more confident in the decision. I think this is definitely going to go over 1.5. Bahamondes usually takes the first round to kind of take his reads, like I said, play that counter game, and it does slow him down a little bit. But I think if you're looking for other prop bets, like I said, maybe play that KO based on what's happening, or you could just bet for it to go the distance. That might also be safe. Again, depends on what kind of output Bahamondes is putting in that first round. But yeah, I think this one, I could see why he's the favorite. The money line, it's a little tricky. It's kind of wide right now, but I think if you don't jump on it now, it's only going to get bigger. Having said that, the ESPN odds did have it at minus 210 versus plus 175. So it did come down just a little bit, but I don't think that downward motion is going to keep going necessarily. I think people are pretty high on this Bahamondes kid for good reason. So maybe jump on it now. I'm not sure it's getting any better.
He throws a lot of different leg kicks, which is his specialty, and he has those long legs. You look at the height and reach advantage in this one. You got 6'3", 6'3" to 5'7", and then 75.5 reach to 72. So Klein cuts into that reach a little bit, but just the height is going to play a big factor in the leg kick game of Bahamondes, because he's going to look to strike from a distance, throw a lot of those leg kicks to the leg and to the body, and he likes to throw that high leg kick every now and then to his opponent. And Ludwig Klein is a type of guy that is a counter striker. He likes to use the counters to attack his opponents. It's very hard to get inside of him, but if he can hit him from a distance and keep on moving around, that's where you'll have success. Jai Herbert started to have success with that, and then he got hit with the point deduction, and that's what led to the tie, because Klein kept on getting inside and then grappling up with him, and then he took Herbert down a couple of times, but then he didn't have much success of his own getting the striking together, whereas Herbert got into a groove and he was able to get going, and then he just got killed by that late point deduction that led to him drawing with Ludwig Klein. Bahamondes is going to be a more explosive striker. He knows how to mix those crazy leg kicks with his hands. He has a decent jab, decent cross, but it's going to be 60% leg kicks that he's going to throw at his opponent. He's going to constantly keep the distance with that, and it's going to be him who's going to be dictating the pace of the fight with those leg kicks, because he's not going to allow Klein to get close. He's just going to chop away with those leg kicks, throw the side T kicks at times to keep him there, and it's not going to allow Klein to get going. And because of that, I think it's going to be a decision fight by Bahamondes. I could see a 29-28 to where Bahamondes just throws a lot of leg kicks, does enough to win the rounds. Not much of a crazy damage to either opponent. Maybe Klein could get into him late in round 3 when he gets desperate and he needs to rush in to get inside and to get some offense going. But I think Bahamondes controls the pace, lands like 30 to 40 leg kicks. He has good movement, and he's going to avoid anything that Ludwig Klein tries to get going. And I love the over 2.5 prop bet on here. I think that is great, because I don't think that Bahamondes is going to knock out Klein, because it takes a lot to knock out Ludwig Klein. He's very good at dodging big strikes and to counter. And then on the other side, I think Klein's going to have a big trouble getting inside of Bahamondes because of those long legs. So I'm going with Bahamondes by decision. I really like the over 2.5 line there, and that's about it. Maybe attack the live odds line depending on who gets started and how you're feeling about the fight. But this is more of a one where I got to see what's going to happen early in the first couple minutes before I even decide to jump on it live or not.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be fun to watch for sure. Yeah. Bahamondes is an exciting fighter to watch, which is why I think he's got a good career ahead of him in this sport.
Let's move on to the next fight on the main card. We got a light heavyweight matchup between Tanner Boser versus Alexa Kimura. Boser comes in the -180 favorite. Kimura comes in the +155 underdog, and this will be his first fight back in 2 or 3 years. What are your thoughts on this fight?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This is the fight like I don't really give a shit about. Like this is not really my cup of tea. Both of these guys are not really very impressive. They like Tanner Boser for sure looks like he's on his way out. What's he lost like his last 4 fights, I think? Let me look. Let's see. He has lost. Out of his last 5 fights, he has only won 1 of them, and it was against OSP, who, at that point, OSP was pretty much done with his career. Tanner Boser is pretty much a one-trick pony in a lot of ways. He has a susceptibility to strong wrestlers and being taken down, which means he's, one of the older generation heavyweights. He's a big boy swinging hammers. I know he moved down to light heavyweight, possibly to get like a strength and size advantage. It doesn't really seem to have changed much, if anything. Ian Kutsalaba made pretty quick work of him in 1 round. So, it didn't seem like the transition down to light heavy is yielding the results he wants. And then Camor, like you said, he's coming off of a 2.5, almost 3-year break. And from what I recall, when he was here, he wasn't really doing super spectacular. Yeah, he was coming off of a 2-fight losing streak against William Knight and Nikolai Nigger. Oh, Jesus. I can't. Nigaru. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, I can't say that.
Negroamano.
Yeah, that one. There's too many vowels in that one. But yeah, I think neither of these guys is really anything special. With Camor, he's a little bit more durable. He can definitely take some pretty serious shots and keep going. He's not a, super big power guy until you hurt him a little bit. Then he'll start swinging versus being more the technical guy. He'll turn into more of the brawler. But then he gets tired. And I think that's kind of what's catching him is that his gas tank runs out. Because once you hurt him and he knows, like, oh, it's go time, he starts throwing everything he's got into every punch. And then, he just burns himself out, which that's kind of what Tanner Boser does too. So, I think this is going to be one of the older, old school big boy swinging hammer style fights. I think considering that Kamura has been on a long break and at least Boser has been fighting, I think that could maybe be enough to give Boser a small edge here. But yeah, I think it's going to come down to like, who can get the lucky shot, because both of these guys have that I'll eat one to give one style of stand-up striking. I don't see either guy really having a strong wrestling threat here. Both of them can do a little wrestling, but it's not like a central point of their game. So, I mean, if we're comparing power against power, I would say Boser has a small power advantage here. So, I mean, you could, potentially look at this as Boser getting a KO probably later, maybe in the second round, I think. But yeah, because either guy has that puncher's chance, I just lean towards Boser because he is kind of the heavyweight coming down. So he is a little bigger. He has a strength advantage against the guy who took a long break and does accumulate a lot of damage in his fights because he will eat one to give one. And I think if that's the case, then the guy with slightly more power is going to, accumulate or give damage at a better rate. And, if Kumar is accumulating damage too quickly, along with his gas tank issue, I think that's just not going to be a good combination for a long fight. So yeah, Boser by KO. I'd say probably under 2.5 would be the safer one, just because we are looking at big boys swinging hammers here. The live odds are, it's kind of a biggish spread. Maybe you want to jump on that, maybe you don't. I think it might be safer to play finishing inside the distance, but you might just have to play the live odds on this one because, again, puncher's chance means it could go either way. I'm just playing the odds based on, the slight advantage in the power and Camor's gas tank issue combined with a long break. I think that's not going to do as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short on this one. Tanner Boser has good cardio. He's one of those big heavyweights that will utilize in the kickboxing range. Didn't showcase too much of that power as much because he was throwing a lot of leg kicks and then he would counter with strikes at times, but was pretty decent in clinch up, and that's why you didn't see a lot of finishes for him except for against Vincent Prue. And then it got Alexa Kamor coming off of a 2-3 year layoff. He's more of a guy that likes to stand inside the pocket and trade and bang. He a lot too much at times, and it was susceptible to being knocked out because of it. He's just going to stand in front of you and throw and not really block too much. So I'm going with Tanner Boser in this one. I think he gets back in the win column. He is susceptible to getting hit, though, by Kimura because Kimura isn't afraid to stand there and trade with you. So there is that chance that Kimura could land a shot if Boser isn't smart enough to move out of the way or block anything that he's thrown at. But I just feel like Boser and his advantages with fighting more and fighting the better competition, moving down the lightweight and being the better striker, I favor him here. So I'm going to go round 2 knockout as well. I could see this one going to decision because he doesn't have as much power, but I feel like with that move down the lightweight, you might see that power pop back up with him being the bigger guy with the bigger hands, and it might surprise us with how much power that he can have, because he got hit very early against Ian Cutelaba, and that's kind of a weird fight that got booked there. Like, he gets moved down, and even though Cutelaba was on a losing streak, it was against better competition in that top 10 of the light heavyweight division, so it kind of was like masks by that. Like, you didn't think of that because of the losing streak. So I think Tanner Boser gets it done round 2. With anything else, I'm going to stay away from a lot with this one, just because this one screams upset. If anything, where Kimura could get it, I just feel like if he shows up, Tanner Boser should get it done, and I'd rather just wait and bet it live, because if he's losing, I feel like he can come back and win. Compared to Alexa Kimura, we don't know that much because he's been away for so long. We don't know what condition he's going to come in here. He could come in here and be a totally different fighter, or he can come in here and be the same guy that we expect him to be. We just don't know.
Yeah. That's why I give like 0 shits about this fight. It's not going to be particularly interesting.
Let's move on to the next fight that we have for you. We got 4 fights left on this UFC Nashville card. We got a featherweight matchup here between Gavin Tucker going up against Diego Lopez. Tucker is the +110 underdog, whereas Diego Lopez is the -135 favorite. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one's another one where it's kind of hard to tell what's going to happen. I mean, you got Lopez. When you look at his record, he's actually a pretty impressive guy. He has, 11 submissions, 8 knockouts, and 2 decisions. His losses mostly come by decision, which means he's a pretty durable guy. But the leagues he's fighting out of aren't particularly, awfully competitive. He fights out of Lux Fight League. I see a couple of fights with Fury FC. That's about it. Like, Fury's a little bit bigger. I haven't even heard of Lux. So it could be that the impressiveness of his, resume comes from the fact that, he is a little bit more skilled in a fight league that just doesn't have as much competition. We've seen this sort of phenomenon happen before, where guys who are kind of killing it in these smaller leagues come up to the UFC and they just don't belong yet. They're just outclassed, right? I think he's pretty tough, and he had a debut against Mavasor Evloev. That's a hard draw for a debut for anybody. Evloev is a freaking monster when it comes to that sambo wrestling he's got. He just grinds you out. And I think Lopez actually did pretty well considering how tough his opponent was. He showed that he had good power in his hands. He's a bit of a wild brawler, so I think he's using those kind of wide looping shots to gain that momentum to get the number of KOs he's gotten. But he did show that he has good grappling. He was actually able to hold his ground with Evloev for a pretty decent amount of that fight. Like, the first round, he was doing well. Second round, he was starting to tire out. And really, it was the third round that Evloev just ground him out, and he was out of gas. Which, a gas tank issue on your debut is not to be unexpected. Like I said, UFC is just a different level of competition. But yeah, he is very good about hunting for submissions. That's what kept him in the fight with Evloev, is that Evloev didn't have time to just settle, find a position he liked, and then just grind it out like he did, in previous fights, where he mostly takes the back and he's just hunting for that rear naked. Even if he doesn't get it, he's just accumulating points on the cards. He couldn't really do that as much with Lopez, because Lopez was very active about hunting for submissions constantly. He does have a tendency to fight off of his back with that jiu-jitsu style, which I think ultimately led to his defeat against Evloev, who has a very strong top pressure game in his wrestling, which when those two things mix, usually the wrestler has the advantage in both cardio and on the scorecards, just because of what the judges are saying here. So there is sort of that weakness there, which Tucker does kind of have. He has his own ability to, grapple. He has decent striking. I think in this particular matchup, I don't necessarily see him as the power striker. I think that Lopez has the power advantage, but I think Tucker probably has the wrestling advantage. But I'm not sure Tucker is necessarily ready for all the activity that Lopez has when he's on the ground. Like, if Tucker gets the top position, I don't think he's necessarily ready to be problem solving again and again and again and again, like Evloev did. Evloev is just a cut above the rest when it comes to that grappling. And not only that, Tucker's coming in after having not fought in almost 2 years. His last fight was in 2021, and that was when Dan Ige freaking demolished him and just knocked him the hell out. So I guess he knocked him out so hard, he just, put him out for 2 years. But I think what's ultimately going to happen when this matchup, because Lopez is kind of a newer guy, Tucker is coming off of a long break. I think there's going to be initially a lot of respect for each other's grappling. So it's going to come down to the stand-up. I see Tucker maybe being a little bit more poised, waiting behind his jab a little more. Whereas Lopez, when he connects, he can cause more damage. So that's probably going to lead him to play more of a counter game. So it will depend on how well has Tucker been maintaining that striking. Because Lopez is kind of a sneaky guy, especially when he's fresh. If he catches you, that damage is going to accumulate quick, I think. And then usually once you get to the second round, I think once they've made their reads, we're going to kind of see if that wrestling versus jiu-jitsu element comes into play or not. Because it could be the case that, maybe Tucker has a successful first round. He's maybe not necessarily dominating, but he's staying just ahead in volume and keeping Lopez at a long enough distance to eat these big shots, especially with the chin in the condition that it is after that Dan Ige fight. I think you don't want none of Lopez's power there. But if he pulls out a strong first round, Tucker might think, this might be the winning strategy. And Lopez is not really the guy to hunt for takedowns. He's the guy to hunt for submissions. So you got to get him to the mat before you see all that activity. He's not the guy who's going to chase you to the cage and pick until you fall. So if that's the case, if Gavin Tucker decides it's easier for him to play at range, we're probably going to see more of a stand-up match. Lopez has, the puncher's chance, but I think Gavin Tucker might have the advantage in just experience, playing a more controlled distance game in the striking, knowing he doesn't necessarily want to get caught. I think Lopez does get aggressive, though, in the later rounds, especially when he knows he's behind. He was able to really catch Evloev a couple times with some nasty shots. I think if he catches Gavin Tucker with those shots, Gavin Tucker goes down, especially after that beating he took against Ige. I think that probably compromised his chin significantly. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the same after that. So this one's a little bit hard to kind of suss out without really watching that first round. It could be just experience wins the day. But I do like that Lopez gets a little bit more aggressive in the later rounds. I think that could tip the scale, maybe give him a decision victory, possibly open up for a late submission. If he gets a knockdown and then jumps on Gavin Tucker, then he puts it in his world, that sort of situation. But I would be leaning very, very timidly towards Lopez, probably by decision, probably over 2.5, given the pace these two guys have in that first round. There's probably for sure going to be a second, which is usually when Lopez starts to get a little more aggressive. So that'll be kind of the turning point, and we'll be able to tell how this fight's going to play out after that. Besides that, I mean, the spread is pretty thin, so you could play on the Lopez money there if you want. But again, there's a lot of factors here where this could go either way based on how that second round plays out. I think it's maybe safer to just play the live odds and just kind of see how things go and make the decision once we know which fighter shows up to the fight night,
Going into this, I agree with you with everything with Diego Lopez. He looked very sharp against Evloev. I think Evloev took him lightly in that one because he was Lopez was taking that fight on 3-4 days notice.
Which is crazy how good he did with 4 days. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. But then looking at the other side, Tucker did get hit by Ige, but it's been a while since that fight has happened, and then he's had 3 fights canceled. Within that, that's why he hasn't fought. He had 2 that were canceled against Pat Sabatini and then 1 against somebody else, and then it gets into this one. And he's been a very good wrestler, and I think in the Dan Ige one, he went right into that one, and the first thing he was doing was he was trying to trade shots with Ige, and Ige was just quicker to the punch than he was, got him, and then got him knocked out. And I think he's going to play it safe in the first fight back here. And I think he's going to go right to the grappling side of things. He's going to go to the wrestling. He's very well versed in that. He's had fights where he's had 5 takedowns here, 7 there, 4 here. It's just an advantage for him, and he does his best when he can get the fight to the ground and pound, wear on his opponent, and then stand up and then start striking because he has good cardio. He has showcased that he can look well. compared to a guy like Diego Lopez, who throws hard, has very good jiu-jitsu, especially against Evlov. He is good with his grappling, but he showcased that he started to kind of slow down a little bit in that one, and that's where Evlov took over. And I could see a little bit of that same action here, where Lopez might be the harder puncher, the better striker, but Gavin Tucker is going to have a chance to take him down. Lopez was still taken down 4 times in that fight, and he was controlled in that fight for a little bit amount of time there. I believe the total amount was 9 minutes. So he still was controlled by 9 minutes. It's just that he was able to counter a couple spots to where he was tough enough to lock in a submission attempt on Evlov here, then land something there on Evlov. But it was just enough to showcase how good he was able to do in a short amount of time. I think Gavin Tucker is going to come in with a better game plan. He's not going to overlook Diego Lopez. He's going to take him down several times, control him on the mat. He's not going to attack the submission positions like Evlov did that got him threatened by Lopez. And it's going to be more controlling the position, a little bit less action. He might throw an elbow here, a ground and pound there, but he's not going to overdo it. He's going to prioritize keeping the position rather than attacking. And then when they're standing up, he's going to look to take him down some more. So I love the decision here. I'm going to lean towards Gavin Tucker there. I think the fact that they're giving him plus 110 odds is a benefit to me, because I thought even with this, he would have been the favorite, because he's been in the UFC for over almost 10 fights now. I think it's somewhere close to that. And Diego Lopez is just making his first 4 fight here since he took the other one on short notice. So the fact that they're making him the favorite here is beneficial to me and anybody on the Tucker side. So I'm going with Tucker by decision. I love the over 1.5 line here, and I like the money line since he's the underdog here. So I'm going to go with Tucker on this one.
I am excited to see how Lopez does on a full training camp.
Yeah.
If he can pull out that performance on 3 or 4 days, I'm excited to see him at his best. So
yeah,
let's see how it plays out.
I just know that if this was against a striker, I might have been went elsewhere. But it's against a wrestler in Tucker, just like Evlov was, and Evlov was still able to take him down 4 times and had almost 10 minutes of control time in a 3-round fight. And it was just 2 stupid mistakes that Evlov made. And even though I still think Evlov is twice as better as Tucker, I think Tucker's going to come in with a better game plan of control over action on the mat.
I mean, we'll see. We actually haven't seen Lopez with the game plan. Like, you can't put together a game plan in 3 or 4 days, especially not against Evloev. Like that's like a month's worth of planning at least before you ever hit training camp. If you know that fight's coming, you need to like sit with your coaches, watch all the tape you can, and go, where are the weaknesses? Because there's not very many. So for 3 or 4 days, I do think because of his jiu-jitsu style, he does kind of accept the bottom, but he is pretty good about that activity. I think that's what kept him in that fight. Especially with no ability to plan or even get a full training camp. So I'm excited to see what he's going to be like. I think if he can, do a pretty big performance here, that would be, that would bode really well for his future career in the UFC. For sure.
Let's move on to the feature bout on the card. We got a light heavyweight matchup between Dustin Jacoby versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. Jacoby is the plus 120 underdog, and then Kennedy Nzechukwu is the minus 140 favorite. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one's another kind of like, it feels pretty open and close to me. Like, I feel like Jacoby is more of a decision fighter these days inside of the UFC. He's got good kickboxing, and he can stay on his feet. He's got good takedown defense, which means most of the time he wins because of his volume, not necessarily because of his power. He can wrestle on the cage pretty well, and he even gets takedowns every once in a while, but it's not really a key part of his game. Nzechukwu is really big for the division. He is a big light heavyweight. He's big and tall, very long. He's got a crazy reach, and he does have pretty good power in his hands. But early on in the fight, he's one of those guys who, again, is very focused on the counter game, which keeps his output low in the beginning. So I think that first round is definitely going to favor Jacoby, especially when he's fresh. He's not tired. But Nzechukwu, once you like really hit him, once you hurt him and you let him know it's a fight, then he starts to kind of pick up the pace a little bit. I would compare his style a little bit closer to kind of like who am I thinking of? Neil Magny. He's very similar to Neil Magny in a lot of ways. Like, he'll do the distance game for a little bit because he has that reach. He can place that power. But once he figures out that the counter game he's using has holes and, the other guy can touch him, he's very good on the cage, especially in the clinch. He gets really nasty with those knees and elbows. And with that frame, with that body, he's got, it's very hard to take him down, and he can generate a ton of power. And that's how he just really makes, dudes suffer in that clinch. And that's somewhere where I think Jacoby is less active in striking. I feel like Jacoby, when he goes to the cage, it's more to like pin you there, control you, get a good position, get some control time in there. Maybe occasionally hunt for the takedown if it's looking like it's going to be that kind of fight. But Nchekwu, I think, is way more active in terms of accumulating damage and letting people know who's in control of that cage exchange, instead of it being like the equivalent of lay and pray on your feet, So I think with the damage accumulation that Nchekwu will be able to cause at that range, I think it's going to come into play for sure in the second and third rounds, which is why I kind of like Nchekwu for a decision, depending on how quick he can get going and how much damage he's able to accumulate on Jacoby. We could maybe see like a late third round knockout, but I'm not super high on that one. I'm really liking the decision a lot more. For sure, over 1.5. Both of these guys, like I said, none of these guys have like big finishes in the first, really. That first round for Nchekwu is really more like he's feeling you out. He's playing a heavy counter game. Even Justin Jacoby does put, volume out, but he's not trying to finish the fight in the first round. He's just trying to put some points on the board, take his reads, get an idea for what's going on, and then in the second, he kind of picks it up a little bit. So I feel like if Nchekwu is, aggressive in that second and third, it's going to be an easy decision. There is always the possibility that because Jacoby isn't a power striker, he's not going to be able to hurt Nchekwu enough to like make him kind of respect that this is a fight and I need to like go balls out now. And Jacoby could just outpoint him, just outvalue him and get a decision. But because that threat is there and all Nchekwu has to do is walk forward and close the distance because he's so big and long, I think the clinch game is going to be a bigger factor here, more so than just Jacoby being able to maintain that distance consistently for 15 straight minutes. I think that's the harder job here. Versus Nchekwu, all he's got to do is crowd him, start landing those elbows, control him, the stuff that he usually does that leads to his KO and decision victories. But Jacoby is also pretty durable. That's the other reason I'm not super high on a KO finish. But yeah, for sure over 1.5. Maybe play the live odds, especially after that first. When we're looking at the second round, we can get a better feel for what's going to happen for the rest of the fight on the live odds. Maybe it might be worth it there. But right now that spread isn't too big, so you might want to go with the minus 140 with Nchekwu if you're feeling as confident as I am that clinch game is going to be a real factor here.
I see this as a trap fight here. I think everybody's going to be on Kenny and Nchekwu. I like Justin Jacoby here by decision here. Rewatching a lot of Kenny and Nchekwu's fights. One that stood out was the fight against Carlos Urberg, even though he did win that one with that big shot halfway through that fight. He was getting dominated in the volume count. Urberg was very heavy with the attack. He was throwing a mixture of leg kicks and striking with his hands, kind of like Dustin Jacoby, because they both have the kickboxing style. They both like to fight from a range. And with Kenny and Nchekwu, he's the type of guy that likes to be a counter artist. He's not going to throw a lot. He'll sit and wait and to the right time, and then he'll land a big shot. He has power in his hands, and that's usually an equalizer. But when you're fighting a guy from a distance who's not going to give you that range, you kind of have to make it happen. And then that's where Nchekwu might make mistakes trying to utilize that reach advantage a little too much, because he has a 7-inch reach advantage. which is very huge. But because he's not as accurate, he might not active. I mean, he might not use it as much as he should because he's way too patient with his striking. I think in the last couple of fights, we've got sucked into the fact that he fought grapplers and Devin Clark and Ian Kutalaba, who do have power in their hands, but they utilize their grappling more. And he was losing to Devin Clark before landing that shot in that round that he started to have success in, and then he got the finish. Ian Kutalaba had a big first 2 minutes, but as always in his fights, he tired out as soon as he just dropped the cardio in that fight. And then you look at other ones. You look at Carl Roberson. He got that one in round 3, but he utilized the takedowns in that. But Carl Robeson's very easy to be taken down fights. You got the Nikolai Negromano fight that was a split decision where he lost because he kind of fumbled the bag late in the 3rd round. He got KO'd by Dawoon Jung in round 1. He got caught in that one. Then you had the one against Danilo Marquez. He was getting dominated, and Marquez made the mistake of hanging on his back for way too long and tired himself out, and then just got hit there. And then you had the Arlberg one, which was followed by the Stosic one, where he was taken down 4 times by Stosic and out-volumed, but somehow gets the victory. So I feel like he does have the victories, he does have the power, but he really hasn't, in my opinion, grown as much. And even though Justin Jacoby is on a 2-fight losing streak, everybody knows that he beat Khalil Roundtree all 3 rounds, and yet he got lost there. And then he throws his first goose egg against Asmak, which I don't blame him for. Asmak and Mirzazani is a great prospect who has power, and he still was able to put on a decent fight against him, even though he lost this one. So I feel like he's going to come back very strong in this one. He's going to come with the game plan of trying to throw as much as possible and keep the move out, because he does have good cardio and he can throw a high output. And his goal is just going to be avoid that big shot. I feel like he's going to attack the strong striking side of Nchekwu to not give him enough range to get the high output of range on that arm. Is just going to try and chop the tree down, as you would say. He's going to try and hit a lot of calf kicks, a lot of kicks to the side. He's going to move back a distance. He's not going to stay in front of him. He's going to hit him from angles. He's going to play that game. He's going to minimize the power side of things for himself in order to land the volume. As long as he can avoid those big time shots from Nchekwu, I feel like he should easily win the volume game in this one. And I could see a 30-27 by him, possibly 29-28, because I do think that Nchekwu's reach advantage is going to allow him to throw some easy shots at him without having to put a lot into it. I feel like this is kind of a mirror of the Arlberg fight, and Jacoby, as long as he can avoid that one shot, he should be able to win by decision here. So I like the money line with Jacoby here at plus 120. You want to get it now while you can before other people jump on the bandwagon of Jacoby. I love the over 2.5 mark here, and that's about it right now. I think because it goes to the decision, it kind of eliminates a lot of the prop bets that you can go for, in my opinion. So the money line and over 1.5 for me.
Yeah, that's why I put so much emphasis on that second round. This really could go either way. It's either Jacoby's volume or Nchekwu's clinch game. It's one or the other, and it's going to happen in that second round. Once they kind of feel each other out and they get an idea what's going on, I think Jacoby's going to take that first round, and I think that's going to incentivize Nchekwu to want to close the distance. The question is he going to do it? Because it kind of reminds me of when we were talking about Pogues on that last card, when it was like, he would in his Dana White Contender Series fight, he'd go out there and he'd just be like jabbing a couple of crosses, and his coach was like, okay, we need combinations, not just singles. We need more takedown attempts. You need to get him on the cage. You need to get him tired. He's like, oh yeah, I do need to do that. But like when you're out there, sometimes it doesn't connect, So I feel like Nchekwu might know that, but it might not connect. And if it doesn't connect, Jacoby's going to get the volume. But if it does connect, I think he's going to get that clinch game, and it's going to be hell on earth for Jacoby with all that damage accumulation. But either way, I think it's going to go the distance. I like the decision, but I'm not sure which way it's going to go until I see that second round.
I have a feeling he's going to know that he has that big-time reach advantage, but I don't think he's going to grapple up with him. I think he's going to try and use it to strike. I think
more like Muay Thai clinch, not wrestling clinch.
But I still feel like he's going to try and use it to try and knock him out, because that's exactly what he did with Arberg. Even though it worked with him, he did get the knockout. But if he would have tried to get into the clinch position there, he would have been more successful in the minimized distance to throw those hands at from clinch with Arberg. But it seemed like he was too gung-ho happy in countering and throwing that power strike instead of closing it up in distance in the game. It seems like certain fights he does it, and then certain fights he doesn't.
In the fights he gets hurt, and when he gets hurt, that's what flips as a switch, and then he's like, oh shit, okay, it's a fight. So it'll depend. That's why I said, like, if Jacoby doesn't command that respect and hurt him, that's why I feel like Nchekwu might stay on that counter game, which is why I could go either way. Sometimes Jacoby comes out and he's got pretty good hands and he can put the power in there, but it's not consistent. It's not, that's why I don't look at him as the power striker in this matchup, and that could be to Nchekwu's disadvantage. But it's going to come out in that second round, because I think Nchekwu anticipates that with his counter game he's going to get outpointed. I don't think that's going to bother him. He has to get hurt for him to get aggressive. So the question is, can Jacoby hurt him? So we'll see. And I think it happened in the second, because Jacoby usually feels it out in the first. He's not super like power heavy in the first round.
No, he's all about the volume and distance. Let's move on to the co-main event of the evening. Once again, if you're just tuning in for the first time, please smash the like button down below and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not subscribed already. And please hit up in the comment section over there and to the right and let us know what you think of our picks and predictions of UFC Nashville. And from a spend standpoint, let me know what prop bets you're leaning towards for this fight card. But let's lean towards the co-main event. We got a women's strawweight matchup between Jessica Andrade versus Tatiana Suarez. You got Andrade, who's the plus 330 heavy underdog, and then you got Suarez, who's the minus 435 heavy favorite. What are your thoughts on this one?
Man, I'm kind of pissed at the UFC for making all these matchups that are like really hard for us to judge, like this one right here. Like, Andrade is a hell of a fighter. She's been on a losing streak, but she's been losing against like some pretty serious players. Like, if she's going to lose against anybody, and when you look at her record, that is kind of the pattern. Like, she loses against big names who are big at the time, like people who are on their way up. She lost to Rose Namajunas back when she was, banging. Same thing. Zhang Wei Li, Valentina Shevchenko. More recently, Erin Blanchfield, Yan Xiaonan. These are not unknown names. It takes a lot to really finish or beat Andrade. And, you got people like Blanchfield and Xiaonan. Those are some real names right there. That's what it's going to take. Suarez is a name, but she did take 5 years off, and then she just recently came back, got a pretty dominant victory. It was a very good victory against De La Rosa. That was impressive, especially after 5 years. Like, that just speaks to how good of a wrestler she is. But her striking is not 100% there, and that's pretty dangerous going up against Andrade, who is a very good striker. She's pretty much good everywhere. She got power in her hands. She can wrestle on the cage. She's got a great submission game, both on the feet and on the mat. I think she's the only person to complete a head and arm triangle while on the feet, which is crazy. But yeah, she's really very well-rounded. So I think the fact that she's lost the last two, it's kind of more, it makes sense given her history. Like, that's usually who she loses to. I think Suarez has kind of an uphill battle here. She is very dominant in her wrestling. The problem is getting Andrade to the ground, because she has to close the distance and eat those punches. I'm not 100% sure she can necessarily eat Andrade's punches. I don't think that Montana De La Rosa has the same kind of hands that Jessica Andrade does. Andrade commands respect from opponents because of that power. And yeah, she got caught by Yan Xiaonan, but Yan Xiaonan also is pretty freaking good at the striking. And I was impressed in the Blanchfield fight for both fighters, actually. Blanchfield was amazing with her hands, because she really didn't get that much action on the mat. Like, normally she just dominates on the mat with the wrestling. Andrade was able to fend her off pretty effectively, keep it on the feet, but Erin Blanchfield is still able to, cause enough damage to create an opening for that submission, which was impressive. I think, what were the stats on that? We'll look it up in a minute. But yeah, this is kind of a tough
I'm bringing
matchup.
it up right now.
Bring it up, okay, because that was an impressive fight. This is kind of a hard matchup for me because again,
against
Suarez,
Blanchfield, it was 53-51 strikes. Andrade in round 1, 44-40. Blanchfield, no takedowns, but she did have her 39 seconds along the fence. And then round 2, Andrade was 13-7, but Blanchfield had the takedown, and that's what led to the rear naked choke.
Yeah, no, that was impressive for both parties, I think, because we really haven't seen Blanchfield go as heavy, like without the wrestling, right? That's usually her go-to, and that's how she dominates. But she's shown, like, hey, I can stand, I can strike too, and I can find that perfect opening and finish the fight whenever I want with my wrestling. But if I need to stand to strike, I can. And same with Andrade. Andrade fending off, Blanchfield, that's a tall order. Like, there's a lot of women who can't fend off Blanchfield like that. So that takedown defense, I think, is going to be the turning point here. If that takedown defense holds up and Suarez has to stay on the feet, there's no way her hands can compare to Andrade. It's like they're in two different classes. But if Suarez can kind of play it a little bit more like Blanchfield did, where she is more comfortable staying on the feet, finding that perfect opportunity, and then securing that takedown and just dominating there, that's her path to victory. But based on her history, the hands aren't there, which is making this really tricky, right? So because the hands aren't there, I don't think she can replicate what Blanchfield necessarily did, especially with all that heat coming at her. Because Andrade, when she knows there's blood in the water, she gets very aggressive, and it only takes a couple of strikes for her to really put you in a spot where you're in a lot of trouble. So again, this could go kind of either way. It's going to depend on that first, second round. We got to see how Andrade's takedown defense is going to stand up against Suarez, and we got to see how Suarez's hands are going to stand up against Andrade's. So it's really hard to say, but I think either way, this fight probably finishes in the second round, either by KO for Andrade or by submission for Suarez, which means you could probably play the over 1.5 and be fairly safe on that. It's hard. I want to go for Andrade, but that's how good Suarez is in the wrestling. So it's hard for me to come down definitively on one side, especially if I'm telling you where to put your money at. I'd play the live odds on the first. That's a pretty huge spread. And if the first round ends up going to Andrade, you might see a swing, so you might lose that plus money. But the gap might be closed enough to where even if it's not plus money, it might still be workable. And of course, if Suarez ends up having a strong first round, then playing the live odds on that, minus 400 is probably not going to be profitable. But you could go for the finish by submission in the second, or for sure, like finish inside the distance. So it would just depend again. How does that first, second round go?
A fight that I would love to see in the future would be Tatiana Suarez and Erin Blanchfield, because I feel like cool. Just the grappling side of things with the IQ would be so well. Just look into the past before she retired and then came back. Tatiana Suarez fought Carla Esparza, who has showcased that she's one of the best at grappling in that division. Suarez took her down 9 times in 3 rounds and got the third round KO and beat her 82 strikes to 6, had 9 takedowns, and had 13 minutes of control time on a high-level grappler in Esparza. Then she did what she did to De La Rosa coming back. She did the same thing. She had 4 takedowns against Nina Nunez. She took down Alexa Grasso, former champ, 2 times in a round 1 rear naked choke victory over Alexa Grasso. And then she had 2 opening fights against 2 fighters that aren't even in the UFC anymore. So that just shows me, even though she's had that gap, that shows me where some of the fighters were at then compared to her and how she is coming back. And I feel like she can, with her grappling, she can come back in and be just as good. And as long as she can improve that striking, and I feel like it's going to be a battle of can she take down Andrade, or can Andrade keep the fight standing and see how it is in a stand-up game? Because I do think she lost a little bit of confidence in that fight against Yan Xiaonan, where Yan Xiaonan was
that was a monster knockout.
was a quicker, accurate striker, and then Andrade just looked. Something looked wrong with her. She was throwing too many looping shots. She didn't have very good movement. She was off. And that's why there's a big gap here. And I see Tatiana Suarez getting this one by round 2, rear naked choke again. And just like I said, round 1, I think Andrade will have a little bit of advantage with the striking. She does pretty decently with defend the takedowns early on, but then I feel like it's just a matter of time before she gets taken down, and that's where Suarez has the huge advantage. She's just so good at holding the position, attacking her opponent from behind, and getting that sub. It doesn't matter who it is. She just has that advantage. And with what she's done against the top grapplers in that one, it's just a matter of what she can do to Andrade when she gets on her back. And I think round 1 would be very beneficial to Andrade. And then round 2, I feel like Suarez can handle everything and just get to the back. We just haven't seen somebody being able to strike against Suarez because she's so dominant in getting that takedown early and holding the position. We really haven't seen anybody throw at her. There's not that much tape because in the 6 fights, she has 24 takedowns, averaging 4 to 4.5 takedowns a fight, which is just unreal when it comes to women's MMA. It's just imagine what she would have done had she not retired. She might have been a potential champion already. And I think she could make that run. I think she can make that run now. It's just going to be how she does against Andrade here. And I think it's a testament to how she looked against De La Rosa that she got that minus 435 mark on here because she was very good in that one. And with her being rusty there and having one fight under her belt now, I can only imagine what she's going to do with Andrade, who's not going to challenge her in the grappling side. She's going to challenge her with the striking, but I think she's going to close the gap early. So I think Suarez gets this one in round 2 by submission. I think in this one, you can't attack this money line unless you do it live. But I do think that having her win by sub is going to be a very good prop, and then maybe under 1.5, over 1.5. It just depends on how fast she can get. It just depends on how fast she can get the takedown in round 2. Because once she gets it, I think it's a lock almost. It's just a matter of when she could get it in round 2. So it's one of those things where it could be under 1.5, but then it could be over. Maybe you look at the odds and then take a chance on whatever odds better.
I would probably say over because I think Suarez isn't stupid. I think she knows how good Andrade's hands are, and she has good takedown defense. I think Suarez knows that if she just goes balls to the wall, it's just going to burn energy in the first round for no reason. I think she's going to be a lot smarter about it. I think she's going to have to, problem solve with those hands, but that is going to mean she's going to have to take reads in that first round, which means that first round she's not, she's going to be hunting for takedowns. But I don't think she's going to be as aggressive as normally because she's going to be afraid of that knockout, which means you're probably guaranteed a first round. That second round, I think, it will depend on how well she could read in the first. If Andrade is kind of berating her with punches anytime she gets close, that's harder to read. That's less openings, right? So that's usually Andrade's, go-to sort of method is if it gets close, we just start striking, we start throwing heat. So I think that's going to kind of slow down Suarez's timetable a little bit on making those reads. To where, I think she's probably going to find her rhythm late in the second round. Then maybe if she gets that takedown, she can find that submission. Andrade does have a very good submission defense. So we might even be looking at if she does get the submission late in the third. But again, if Andrade can maintain that standing fight with that respect in the hands, I mean, there is always that puncher's chance in that second round knockout, which is, again, I got to see the second round, really. That's going to be what seals it for me because this could go either way. This is a crazy matchup.
Yeah, when I look at it, the person that challenged Suarez the most was Nina Nunez. Right before she went away back in 2019, she went back and forth with her and had 48 strikes. But other than that, the most strikes that have been thrown at Tatiana Suarez was Viviana Ferreira in Suarez's debut at 13 strikes. And that was in a 3-round.
Nunez is not Jessica Andrade, though.
No.
That's the thing. Like, that's why it's such a wild card, because Andrade is who she is. If this was any other fighter, like if this was Rose Namajunas, then I'd be going Suarez all day. Just because, like, most of the time, women have a lot in the MMA circuit here in the UFC. They tend to have a lot more low output, less power, less like walk-off knockout potential. But Andrade is just kind of a wild card like that. I think she was off in that Yan Xiaonan fight, and there is that personality type where she's coming back with something to prove. And I think if she knows if she can finish a name like Suarez, she's back on that rocket ship towards the top. Yeah. And, all previous sins.
It could go either way, though. She could do that and get a knockout, or she could start forcing those knockout strikes, and it could walk into a takedown.
And walk into a takedown. Yeah. It could go either way. That's why I said I hate the matchmakers for this shit.
Exactly. Let's move on to the main event of the evening. This is going to be contested at catchweight. We got Cory Sandhagen versus Rob Font. Cory Sandhagen is the -270 favorite. Rob Font is the +220 underdog. What are your thoughts on this main event?
I actually do like this main event. I think if this was Sandhagen, Umar Nurmagomedov, I think Umar would just blow right through Sandhagen. Sandhagen has evolved a lot, and I acknowledge that. He's always had excellent kickboxing. He's always had great movement in the feet. He has lots of volume. He can bring the power. And more impressively, he's really rounded out his wrestling and grappling game ever since he got submitted by Aljamain Sterling in less than a minute. He's demonstrated he is pretty capable of wrestling on the cage now. He even secures takedowns every once in a while, like that fight with Marlon Vera. What did he get? He got 3 takedowns. Cory Sandhagen getting takedowns is kind of crazy considering where he started. So he's had a lot of growth, but I think it's Umar Nurmagomedov. That guy's kind of a beast. This matchup actually makes things a little bit more even, I think, because Rob Font, I think he has probably a power advantage, but he's not really as much of a volume guy. So I think against a volume guy like Sandhagen, he might be forced to take the counteroffensive game. So there is a chance he could catch him. Of course, there's the wrestling there. Now, normally I would say Rob Font, absolutely the better wrestler, but he is taking this fight on short notice. And because Sandhagen has grown and evolved so much, that's a guy you have to specifically plan for. He now not only has, high output, high movement, very technical, very cerebral striking. He still gets a little fancy when he shouldn't, but you add to that a pretty decent wrestling ability and, takedown defense. On top of that, he can threaten takedowns of his own. That's a new threat. That's a threat you have to prepare for. Kind of like what we were talking about earlier, those fighters where, Lopes and Ivloyev, you can't prepare for Ivloyev on 3 days' notice. I think Font has a lot of experience. I think he could do a lot in, 2 weeks' notice against Sandhagen, but that's not a full training camp. That's not, as much time as I think he would need to really flesh out a very good game plan, like what he did to Cody Garbrandt, for example. Another great example where Garbrandt kind of has the striking advantage against Font. Font would be the volume guy in that context. But he did a very good job of going in with a good game plan. And then once, Garbrandt showed his hand, he figured out the game, made the adjustments he needed to do, and just managed Garbrandt. But that comes from lots of planning, lots of practice, lots of game planning over the course of an entire fight camp. He doesn't have that this time. And I think with Sandhagen, you kind of need to. Especially with what he did to a guy like Marlon Vera. We saw what happened when Rob Font went against Marlon Vera, and it's not very smart to do MMA math here, but Marlon Vera is a hard guy to beat, and Sandhagen did a really, really good job because of the evolution in his game. So because it's short notice, I think I see why Sandhagen is the favorite here. I think because
I wouldn't say it was too much of a short notice because he was still game planning to fight Sung Yadong a week or two later, I believe it was, or I think maybe it was the same fight card. So it's just the difference in who you're fighting on the card. He's going from Sung Yadong to Cory Sandhagen.
That's a big jump,
and then Cory Sandhagen's going from Umar Nurmagomedov to Rob Font.
Rob Font,
which is a totally different style.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, like, I feel between Rob Font, Umar Nurmagomedov, that's the bigger threat. You know what I mean? Like, Sandhagen had to be preparing hardcore against a strong wrestler in his training camp to even be in the same ring against Umar Nurmagomedov, which kind of helps to kind of dilute Rob Font's wrestling ability. I think he is the better wrestler on paper, but since Sandhagen has been evolving his game and he's been preparing for a way better wrestler than Rob Font, I think that kind of helps him have a better takedown defense in the fight, kind of keep things where he wants to keep them. I think this is going to be probably a hard decision because Rob Font's very durable. I don't see him get knocked out or anything. I think he's going to bite down on his mouthpiece and just keep on going. But what we've seen in the past with Rob Font, unfortunately, when he doesn't get his wrestling going, he does kind of find himself in a bit of a rut where it's difficult for him to pivot and adjust the same way he did against Cody Garbrandt. So I feel like that might happen to him here where he might get a little stone locked there. And it might end up going to Sandhagen by decision just due to the volume and the ability to kind of keep the fight where he wants to keep it, considering how much wrestling he's probably been doing to prepare for Umar Nurmagomedov. Considering the styles, I think you could go either over 1.5 or over 2.5. This is probably going to go the distance. So either one's probably fine. If you wanted to be safer, over 1.5 for sure. These guys, tend to kind of feel it out in that first round anyway.
And remember, this is a 5-round fight.
Yeah. Well, over 1.5. Over 1.5 makes a lot of sense then. Yeah.
So I really
3.5, but
so I like the 2.5, 3.5 in this one because both guys are very good strikers, but they lean towards on the volume over the power. But what I like about this is the fact is Cory Sandhagen, to me, is going to be the better striker. He has better cardio. We've seen the past Rob Font to start out fast, but then slow down a little bit, but he still pours out a high volume like Sandhagen. But Sandhagen has been doing it against better competition, striking wise. And I like the fact there. His one weakness is he stays on the center line. So I think he's going to be susceptible to the jab of Rob Font over and often because he's not going to move off of it and throw from angles. He's going to throw from right in front of him. But then at the same time, he is more eclectic where he throws and adds leg kicks from different angles into the fight, whereas Rob Font's more about his hands. He's great attacking the body, great at throwing the jab, the cross, the uppercut. He has that boxing mentality. So he's going to throw a lot from different angles there, and he's going to be off the center line. So that might be his way of equalizing things. But then once you get into the clinch, that might benefit Sandhagen along the fence. You see him adapting that ever since he fought T.J. Dillashaw, and T.J. Dillashaw did that to him. That's one of the things that he did to Sung Yadong. He's done that in past fights ever since then, is he likes to hold it along the fence and do some elbows, and then he breaks off and starts to throw again. And he has a really good cardio. He can go 5 rounds. He showcased how well he can do with that. He's had some great 5-round bangers in the last 2-3 years. This could be a fight that I can see being 3-2 to where it comes down to round 5 because I like the striking of Rob Font with his hands and being able to throw in the center line, but then I like the unpredictability of Sandhagen because a lot of what he throws, it comes out of nowhere. Even though it's on the center line, he just throws it out of nowhere, and he's going to be the bigger guy with the bigger reach. So I'm going to go with Sandhagen by decision here. I think he outdoes Rob Font just by a little bit. I don't think that them taking the fight on short notice per se affects either fighter because I think the matchup works well for both. Rob Font was already game plan for a striker and Sung Yadong. He's just more of a power striker compared to a finesse guy that's going to throw lots and lots of volume like Sandhagen. But he gets him at catch weight, so that kind of helps out Rob Font to where even though he's, I think, coming up on a week or two ahead of what he was supposed to, it won't affect him too much. And then with Sandhagen,
it's still a big thing for weight cutting, like a week early. Oof,
and then with Sandhagen, he's coming in, he's staying the same night, but he's going up against a guy who's going to have more weight put on him. And instead of a grappler, he's dealing with a boxer. So even though he's still favorite, he might be a little bit rusty early, knowing that he game planned against just a heavy the grappler that was going to take him down, and he did probably a lot of takedown defense in his training to go with his striking. So he's probably going to come out maybe a little bit slower than he used to, because he's probably planning on being more patient than more aggressive in the fight. And now he's going to have to flip the switch and be more aggressive in this one. So you might see him start a little bit slow. So maybe Rob Font can steal the first round, then he takes the next 2, and then maybe Rob Font steals round 4. And then you got to go to round 5. And then by then, I think Cory Sandhagen will be vintage Cory Sandhagen, and he'll take this 3 rounds to 2. So I think with the mark, I definitely would say attack it live, because 270 is kind of high, and you could probably get it down low with Rob Font starting out being a fast starter on fight. So he can get the first round, and then it could go from 270 to minus 150, and you can, boom, take that to the bank there, because once you get Cory Sandhagen to minus 150, I think you're at great odds there live going forward there, because then he'll start to take over in rounds 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I'm attacking that one live, minus 270. I love them over 3.5, possibly over 4.5 mark line, because you can probably get really good odds there, because I don't see either knocking each other out. Possibly, I think Sandhagen will have the better chance of knocking out Font, but do I see him throwing the flying knee again? And if he finishes Font, it's going to be later when he slows down. So I think over 3.5 is definitely a great line there. I might try and eke it towards 4.5, but that's pushing my buttons there a little bit more. So I might lead towards over 3.5 live bet after round 1. Hoping Sandhagen's line goes down a little bit. And other than that, and maybe I'll sprinkle a little bit on rounds 4 and 5 finish for Sandhagen. Maybe he gets that late finish, but it'll be a thing where maybe it's 0.25 units, where it's just maybe I'll take a stab at it and see what happens.
Yeah, either way, this is going to be a fun one to watch. I like this matchup better than the Nurmagomedov one. This is more competitive. There's more that could happen.
This is a fight that's going to be very indicative of where they're at. And, of course, in Nashville, Tennessee, they want to see action. They want to see excitement. And these guys are going to put on a better chance of it lasting longer over a 5-round stretch. Whereas I think with Umar, maybe Umar catches him early and takes down and submits him, or just dominates him on the mat. Even though I think Cory Sandhagen will be a matchup nightmare for Umar on the feet. I think that on the feet, he'll be a matchup nightmare. It's just how Sandhagen it's just how Sandhagen would deal with that when he's trying to defend it. That's the real mystery there. But I think
you have to basically play a perfect game. It'd be a tough fight. One more for the fans. Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz. Pay-per-view is coming up. What do you think? What do you think's gonna get this one?
I got Jake Paul.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, of course. Like
I got
Nate Diaz, if the Vaseline guy rubs too hard, he's gonna open up a cut and the whole damn thing right there.
I got him a decision. I don't think he knocks out Diaz at all, but I think he's hungry to get that back in the win column after losing, of course, to Fury. So,
which is pretty funny. That's the first time we talk so much shit. The old heads, the old, Cage My IQ viewers will remember how much shit we talked about fucking Jake Paul. And the one time he actually does a boxing match against a real boxer, gets his ass handed to him. What did I say? The dude's kind of LARPing here. So, he doesn't want to go back to boxing boxers, so he has to go back to LARPing and fight fucking Nate Diaz for the clout. So, I don't know. I think it's a silly fight to pay for. Don't buy that pay-per-view. Just wait for the highlight reel on YouTube. It's not worth it.
Exactly. But other than that, that'll be it for today's episode. We'll be back for next week for UFC Fight Night. Luke K going up against Dos Anjos, a very, very unlikely matchup that I thought would never happen at welterweight, but it's going to both. Especially in a main event fight, but this is going to be the lead up to UFC 292 in 2 weeks in Boston, Massachusetts. That's going to be a banger of a card, and that's going to be headlined by Sugar Sean O'Malley. So that's going to be fun in that one. But other than that, that wrap things up. We'll be back next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow us on social media, as you see down below, on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. Please hit the like button down below and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel on both Cage My IQ and Bloodline ENT if you haven't done so already. And please give us a comment in the comment section. Show us some love and give me your picks and predictions for UFC Nashville and anything you want to ask us about this card from a Ben standpoint. Feel free to ask. I'll give you my response as soon as I see it. But other than that, just tune into all the content that we pour out on the Bloodline ENT. And we got wrestling, we got MMA, we got fantasy baseball, fantasy football. Football's just in now with training camp, so we're going to be covering a lot of football on the Bloodline ENT. And of course, we also got cinema with Graydon. He just covered, of course, Oppenheimer, and then he just covered Justice League World War. So definitely check that out and check out anything else on there that you see. 2 podcasts a day. You can't beat that. But that'll be it. I'm your host, Cage. This is my co-host, Miles, and we'll see you guys for another edition of Cage My IQ. Thanks for tuning in. Y'all. Peace.